two of the witnesses for this afternoon. That is Mr. Andy Johnson and Mr. Anderson Gill. Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. They've been released for this afternoon, so we have two witnesses to get through. I've had a request that we rise by 5:30. Let's see if we can make that happen. All right, thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Maharaj.
Our next witness is Mr. Krishna Fuentes. And Mr. Ronnie Bissessa will do the summary.
You just read it.
I'll get explain.
Yeah, there's no actual summary, is there? Yeah.
I, state your name,
Krishna Fuentes,
solemnly swear
that
the evidence
I
shall give
to
this commission
in this case
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth. You may have.
Thank you.
Right. Good afternoon, Mr. Fuentes. Thank you for coming. I see you've brought a file with you. Right. Now, first thing I should say to you is this: is that in the first instance, at any rate, you'll not be allowed to utilize that file to answer any questions. All right. Save where you feel you can't answer the question without consulting some note or whatever you might have. Do you follow? The consequence of your relying on anything that you look at in that file will mean that anybody else interested in asking you questions would also be able to look at your file. Do you follow? Because you can't have something private in front of you without us knowing what it is. All right? So
Okay.
This I'm anxious to impress upon you, as it is with everyone, is not a memory test. You're not required to remember dates and times and things like that without assistance. All right? if that assistance is available. However, you've not provided a witness statement for us. What we do have is email correspondence. Mr. Bissessar, who sits opposite you there, is going to summarize that correspondence so that you can hear what it is that we have of what you say about the matter hitherto. Listen carefully to what he says. If he gets something inaccurate, you'll tell me at the end of what he has to say, all right? Otherwise, if you accept that what he says is a fair summary of the position, then you'll say so. What will then happen is Mr. Maharaj, who sits next to him, will ask you a few questions, all right? When he's finished, any other barrister who I permit will be permitted to ask you some questions, all right? I want to apologize for you. I think you've been here on several occasions, and so I appreciate your coming, and I know that sometimes it's very inconvenient, but I appreciate your coming. So you put that file to one side. If you need to refer to it, you refer to me first, and I'll consider it, all right?
I will gladly share. It's a page with notes, diving documents, references, diving laws, and I will gladly share it with the room.
Well, Mr. Fuentes, if you need it, put it into your file, please. If you need it for any purpose, just tell me, all right? So you'll be asked some questions in due course, and if you need to refer to it in order to answer the question, you say that to me, and then we'll see where we go, all right? If you put that to one side, please, for the moment. Thank you. Can we have some water for Mr. Fuentes if he needs it, like most witnesses? I have a little stash here of my own. Leave in that one, would you please? Thank you. All right, Mr. Fuentes, there's a bottle of water if you need it. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, so listen first of all to what Mr. Bissessar has to say, all right?
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Krishna Fuentes is an in-car diving supervisor, a dive system auditor, and a diving client representative. Mr. Fuentes did not provide a witness statement to the Commission, nor did he accept the Commission's invitation for him to be interviewed by the Commission's legal team. By letter dated 17th October 2022, this is at page 166 of the correspondence bundle, the Secretary to the Commission invited Mr. Fuentes to be interviewed. By an email sent on 18th October 2022, and this is at page 3157 of the supplemental witness bundle, which is on the screen, Mr. Fuentes responded, advising that he was not directly involved in the accident and asked to be removed from any further investigation of the incident. The full email is as follows. It's a fairly brief email, Chair, and I'll just read it out. Good evening, Ms. Sinanan. Thank you for your email dated 17th October 2022. As per our conversation today, this is my response. As you already know, my name is Krishna Fuentes of Diego Martin. I have 24 years experience in the diving industry with qualifications as an IMCA diving supervisor, a dive system auditor, and a diving client representative. In your email to me, there was a letter attached. The paragraph 3 implied that I was directly involved in the Paria diving incident that occurred on February 25th, 2022. This statement is not factual, as I was not involved in that project in any way, nor was I involved in any aspect of a rescue or recovery operation of the bodies. On February 27th, 2022, I received a telephone call from Patricia King requesting my participation in a diving procedure and risk assessment. This was scheduled to take place on the same day at 1600 to 1630 hours. The review was solely and specifically focused on a diving operation by LMCS to recover 3 scuba bottles from inside the 30-inch pipeline at Paria and nothing more. This had absolutely nothing to do with the rescue mission. February 27th, 2022 was the first time that I was ever contacted by Paria Fuel Trading in my 49 years of existence. I attended the team's online meeting at 1600 hours that day. My 2 points of input at that meeting were, 1, the 3 scuba bottles that were inside the 30-inch pipeline would not be able to clog the pipeline if they decided to pump water from the other end of the pipeline. 2, that it would have been detrimental to send a diver inside of the 30-inch pipeline without the required PPE and additional safety measures in place. It was my honest opinion, based on industry operating standards, combined with my experience in the field, that this may have resulted in injury or a further loss of life. I was asked to fill out a NDA document, which I complied with. I was asked my opinion solely on making that dive to recover 3 scuba bottles and absolutely nothing else. In service to my country and industry, I participated and gave my requested opinion free of charge out of goodwill. The emails that were sent to me from Mr. Paul Yearwood of Paria-Fuel are all attached as supporting documentation. This includes the meeting invitation, the diving procedure risk assessment, and a document that includes my comments on the diving procedure that was written by LMCS. The LMCS procedure clearly states that the operation was to recover 3 scuba bottles. The above information defines my involvement in a scuba bottle recovery operation. As such, based on this information, I ask that you remove me from any further investigation relating to this incident. Please feel free to contact me for any clarifications. Thank you. By further letter dated 20th October 2022, and this is at page 168 of the correspondence bundle, the Secretary requested Mr. Fuentes to, inter alia, reconsider the Commission's request for him to be interviewed. On the 25th of October 2022, and this is at page 170 of the correspondence bundle, which can be put on the screen, Mr. Fuentes responded in the following terms. Good morning, Ms. Sinanan. I referred to previous correspondence ending with your letter dated 20th October 2022. I am very concerned that having provided you with all the facts relating to my involvement which make clear that I was nowhere near Bird 6 Pointe-a-Pierre on 25th February 2022, you persisted in insisting that I was directly involved in the tragic incidents which occurred on 25th February 2022. You, on behalf of the Commission, appear to have already formed a view adverse to my interest. That being the case, I have consulted my attorney and declined to participate further by either attending an interview or providing a statement as you have suggested. I have already provided you with all the information that I have in my possession, and there is nothing further that I wish to say. Please be guided accordingly. Thereafter, in obedience to a witness summons, Mr. Fuentes made himself available to the Commission. The witness summons was issued on the 9th of November 2022, and it's at page 10 of the witness summons bundle. Mr. Fuentes, do you agree that what I have presented is a true and faithful summary of your correspondence with the Commission?
Yes, I agree.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for that. Mr. Fuentes, may I reassure you that there is no adverse inference to be drawn or conclusion that has been drawn to your interests by this Commission at all. The only reason you're here is because we feel that you are in a position to provide us with some additional assistance, all right? I don't anticipate that will take very long, but if you listen to what Mr. Maharaj has to ask you, and you answer his questions, and then those of the others, I'm sure you'll be gone within a short space of time, all right? Thank you very much. And mark what I say, if there is something you want to refer to, ask me first, and then we will see where we go, all right? Mr. Maharaj.
Mr. Fuentes, after this incident which occurred on the 25th of February 2022 last year, you have been retained by Paria as an expert client representative to assess diving plans for Paria. Am I correct?
Somewhat. Not retained, but on a freelance basis when to review diving documentation.
And have you done any such review since your retention?
Yes, I have.
How many?
Twice.
Twice.
Two documents. Two diving operations.
Okay.
And it's not retention. I don't get a retainer or anything of the sort.
Well, how you want to describe it?
On a freelance basis.
Freelance basis.
Yes.
So in other words, you do it and you do not get any payment,
I get paid for it.
or you get paid for it.
Yes. On a freelance basis,
On a
not a
freelance
retention basis. There's
Okay,
a
all right,
difference.
Okay.
Right. You're not employed as an employee.
No.
You're a freestanding
Independent.
enterprise of your own,
freelance,
independent, and they engage you from time to time as and when they need you.
Yes. Correct.
Right, and you've done that on 2 occasions.
2 occasions.
For which you've obviously been paid. Or you're,
It's in the process.
well, yeah, I know what you mean, right? All right.
Okay. Now, you consider yourself an experienced diver.
Yes. I have 24 years.
24
since
years
1998.
experience. Can I
Yes.
ask you scuba diving with scuba? Are you commercial?
In my early days of diving, I would have done some scuba diving.
But are you a commercial diver
I am
now?
a commercial diver.
And how many years experience as a commercial diver?
I have 12 years as a diver and 12 years of oversight supervisory experience.
And as a commercial diver with experience,
Yes.
and having regard to your total experience as a diver,
Yes.
you would have known that there have been diving to rescue persons from confined spaces.
Kindly repeat that, sir?
As a diver with experience
Yes.
that you have stated,
Yes.
you are aware that there have been rescue of divers from confined spaces.
Globally, there could have been rescues of divers from confined spaces. Not. You have like factual information, like actual cases.
All right, I'll take your answer.
All right.
Do you consider, do you think that you can do a rescue from a confined space?
Could I look in there?
What does he want to look at? I mean, it's a question really that's personal to you, isn't it? You're an experienced diver. Do you believe you are able to effect a rescue from a confined space? Obviously,
Okay,
it would depend
all
on
right.
all kinds of parameters, but
All right.
it's a very broad question. but-
It's a very
yeah.
broad question. The possibility exists to rescue a diver from a confined space, right?
Right. Thank you.
This incident goes a bit further and deeper than just a confined space.
Mr.
This-
Fuentes, but pause there for a minute. I think you'll find it much easier if you just confine yourself to answering the question that's been asked, which is it possible to rescue people from a confined space? And your answer, I think, is yes. Obviously, it will depend on the parameters of what that confined space is.
Yes, but this was more than a confined
Yeah,
space.
well, we're not talking about this one
This
at the
was a
moment.
physically confining space, which is
Mr. Fuentes,
more of a risk.
we're not dealing with this one yet. He's asking you generally, first of all.
Okay,
Right?
well-
If we come to the specifics, you'll be able to tell us all about it.
The next question, Mr. Fuentes. Would you not agree with me that it is possible to rescue a diver from a pipeline that is 30-inch in diameter?
Diving in pipelines is not a thing. Honestly, divers don't go into pipelines. There's no task on the installation of pipelines, the repair of pipelines, the inspection of pipelines. There's no task that requires a diver to go inside of a pipeline. All work is done on the outside of the pipeline.
I agree with that, Mr.
Right.
Fuentes.
So entering a pipeline is not a thing. We do not go inside pipelines.
Okay, but suppose there is an accident and a diver ends up inside a pipeline and the question of rescuing that diver arises. Do you think from your experience, if there's a 30-inch diameter pipeline and the diver is inside that pipeline and there is water in the pipeline, okay? Obviously there's water. Let's say the pipe is even filled with water. Do you think that it is possible to rescue a diver from that pipeline? It is possible, whether it is possible.
A rescue diver would have had three things against him. It's a three high-risk activities, right? It's a penetration dive, 1. 2, intercontaminated waters. 3, with the possibility of further delta P.
Okay,
Right?
I take that.
Okay,
So those are the risks that would have to be considered.
major risk, yes.
Right. And there could be a consideration of those risks, and there could be if it is possible, the dive can take place.
With the proper gears and steps, additional steps, safety steps in place, yes.
Thank you very much.
Does anyone have any questions of this witness? I see shaking heads. It is shorter than you might have expected. I believe there is. Yes, Mr. Mutu.
Good afternoon, Mr. Fuentes.
Good day.
My name is Jason Mutu. I represent the interests of Paria
All right.
and Heritage.
Okay.
Just a few questions for you, by
Sure.
way of clarification. In answer to Mr. Maraj, you said with further steps being taken. What are those steps?
Can I look at my page of notes, please?
What are they?
What or what?
What are the page notes? What is it?
The answer to his question.
You can't remember it.
You said it's not a memory game.
No, that's true. But you wrote the notes. You wrote the notes.
Right.
Right. You had them just before you came into this building, yes?
Well,
Yes?
can I look at my page, please?
Well, if you think that that is the only way in which you can answer the
It is the
question,
best way.
the best way,
With more, and I can give him all the information that way.
all right.
I may
Well,
omit something without.
No, it's not. You're right to remind me of exactly what I said to you. It is not a memory test. So can I have a look at the note first, please?
You?
Yes, me.
All right. Excuse me.
No, wait there.
Okay.
This is all you want to look at, is it?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
More towards the bottom of the page.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I understand. It's really the part in the box that you created at the bottom, I understand. Yes, I have no difficulty with using this to remind yourself of what you wrote on it. But if anyone else wants to see it, they're welcome to do so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, perhaps you'll repeat the question, Mr. Mutu, so that he can.
Right, could you
We can all
please
remind
repeat the
ourselves.
question once more?
Sure, maybe slightly different. But in answer to Mr. Maraj, I believe you said the rescue, I'm using my words, a rescue might be possible provided that certain steps were undertaken.
Right.
Could you indicate what those requirements would be?
Okay, for example, the contaminated water scenario, what is actually was in that pipe is unknown to a point. In that case, we should look at it at a worst case scenario. From a diving perspective, divers should have a full contamination suit to enter that pipe with an appropriate headpiece, diver's helmet, suited for the job, designed for contaminated waters. In terms of a penetration dive, additional steps such as a wet tender in place at the 90.
Sorry, can I ask you to explain what is a wet tender?
All right. So for the diver to enter he will enter the riser, descend past the 90 degrees and start to travel along a horizontal section of pipe to an unknown distance, right? Divers' umbilicals get snagged very easily. So once a diver goes beyond that, he himself may be unrecoverable because his umbilical could get hung up on the 90.
You mean the umbilical as he goes?
Correct, wrong the bend.
As he goes round the bend?
Yes. Yes. It happens very easily.
And going into the
Yeah,
pipe?
correct.
Yeah.
In cases like that, you put an additional diver at that bend to
Right.
tend his umbilical however far he needs to go. So that's what a wet tender is,
Okay, understood.
right?
And is that the position at each time that umbilical goes around a bend? At each place you would have someone, ideally, someone placed to tender the umbilical?
Ideally, yes, but for that to actually be done is almost impossible. Then you have 3-4 divers in the water at the same time, which is a no-no. Is not done.
Right, we've heard some evidence about it. You know that there's this hyperbaric chamber or
Right.
habitat over
Yeah.
the pipe.
Yes.
So the umbilical, we're told, would have to come from the shore down into the,
Right. So you have someone at the entry point,
yes,
and depending on the distance horizontally that he needs to go, you need a tender there as well.
so you might need one under the water as it comes into the chamber, yes. As it comes into the hyperbaric chamber before it goes into
Yes.
the pipe.
Yeah. Someone
Yes.
to tend his
To tend
umbilical
there,
there.
and someone in the chamber as it goes into the pipe.
Possibly.
Right, yeah.
Yes.
So that's 3 or 4 minimum, really.
Or they could, if I have not
Stop
seen.
looking at him.
I have not seen this chamber,
Yes.
so it could have been possible to coil his umbilical there.
Right, to
And have one person tended down inside the riser.
So there are other ways of doing it that
Yes.
might have avoided the necessity of having that many
But
tenders.
the risk would be his umbilical getting snagged on the
Yes,
90.
I got you. Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Mutu.
Right, you identifying the other requirements.
Right, a third umbilical on board. So you have three dive umbilicals. So if one diver penetrating, one diver tending, you need a standby diver on deck just in case anything goes wrong with any of those 2 divers,
Standby diver.
right?
Standby diver, that's what I could write. That's
Yeah.
right, is it? Yeah, standby diver, yes.
With
Did
his
they
own
have-
umbilical, right?
Sorry?
Standby diver with his own umbilical.
With his umbilical. Yeah, so a third umbilical.
Yes.
Is that right? I mean, if somebody's inside the habitat and they've got, which is, as I understand it, about 20 feet into the water, thereabouts, would scuba not be sufficient for that? A tank breathing? 'Cause first of all, he's in a.
Scuba is, if you want to go to the Bago to look at the reef, that's
No,
what,
no.
That's what scuba is for.
I do actually, but that aside.
That's the only use,
Yes.
good use of scuba.
Well, first of all, the person inside the habitat, all the works were being carried out inside the habitat without any equipment at all. Because it's a dry area. Well, not dry, but you know what I mean. They don't need.
It's dewater.
It was pressurized and they were breathing
It was
the air.
dewater.
De-water, is that what it's
Yes.
called? Right, okay. Thank you. So that remained the same. So why would it be necessary for the person who's wet tending, to be wearing an umbilical at all?
No, he won't be wearing an umbilical.
Right.
If anything goes wrong with the two divers that are inside the pipeline,
Right.
then you need to have someone to be able to get to them.
You mean to go down, a third diver to go
Yes.
in to rescue the two divers who are already in?
Yes.
Right. Would they not just be on a rope and pulled out?
Sorry?
Would those divers not be on some sort of harness with a rope to pull them out if anything went wrong?
They may have been pulled out, or they may have been snagged and not be able to be pulled out. I can't say that.
Right, okay. Anyway, from your point of view, you think the safe course would be to have a third diver with an umbilical who could go in and get them?
Yeah.
Right, okay, got you. Thank you very much. So Mr. Mutu's right when he says with his own umbilical.
Yeah. Yes, any additional requirements?
And they would have had to have a sufficient quantity of air to make a penetration dive.
Yeah.
I
You
don't know
mean-
if they had a compressor or if they were using.
You mean either by way of, a compressor for the umbilicals?
Correct, yes.
And then spare tanks to take with them, these
Yes.
little mini tanks that will help them out if the
Now-
umbilical goes wrong.
If they were using big banks to supply the divers, they would have had to have an enough supply to make a penetration dive.
Right. But so that I understand that,
If it was compressor supplied, then they would have had an unlimited amount of air.
yes.
Right.
So that's in the umbilical.
Yes, to supply the umbilical.
Right, to
Yes.
supply the umbilicals. But would they need also additional spare tanks that they
Yes,
would
on
take
your
with
back,
them,
yes.
just in case?
Definitely,
Yeah.
yes. Every dive needs that. Every
Right,
dive,
so if the
yes.
umbilical went wrong,
You
got snagged,
crack your valve.
torn, they turn on the valve and they've got their
And
own
you-
source
yeah,
of air.
And
Gotcha.
then you
you get them
abort
out.
your dive, yes.
Yes, right. Got you, thank you very much.
Any other requirements?
No, that's it.
Okay. Are you aware as to whether full contamination suits are I think the term used was full contamination suits
Yes.
are readily available in Trinidad?
No, they're not.
They're not
They're
available.
not available.
Readily or at all?
They may have a contractor that may have a whole one laying around,
Right.
but
One
to
laying
say to
around.
go into a store to buy it or to get it here, no.
No. Okay.
No.
Right, so that I understand what you're saying. This contamination suit, right, is not one that's available anywhere on Trinidad, as far as you know.
That you going, as far as I'm aware, is not readily available.
Right.
As I said, a contractor may have one laying around. I don't know what condition it would have been in.
Have you seen one in Trinidad in your 24 years of working
Yeah,
here? Have you seen one?
Probably seen one.
You've
Yeah.
seen one. Where was that?
Where was this? Laying around in someone's warehouse. I can't recall where it was.
Thank you.
Right. The inquiries received some evidence about risks associated with a rescue attempt in this pipeline and the methodology that would be employed in order to effect a rescue. So I just want to take you to some of those areas now. And I'm going to ask you whether you agree with some of the evidence that has been given here. It's been suggested that for the rescue to be effected, and on the basis that, the undisputed basis that there were certain items in the pipeline, like divers tanks and so on.
Like,
Now,
like what?
divers oxygen tanks.
Okay, yes.
What would have to happen is that when a rescue diver goes in, he would have to retrieve the equipment, if there's blockage, one by one, each item, and then take it out, and then re-enter the pipeline. So to do it in a methodological manner. Do you agree with that?
That the scuba tanks would have blocked the rescue?
No, that in order to rescue the men, one should employ a procedure. And the procedure would be if the diver goes into the line and encounters a blockage or a tank, if he can free the blockage.
Well, can I ask you, Mr. Mutu, to skip the word blockage for the moment?
Tank.
Let's just deal with each item if you want to, but a tank in the way.
Yes.
So he's going down, he's doing the rescue using your criteria, and obviously it's a risk, but he's going down and he encounters a tank, a scuba tank, right? Presumably with the spider attached to it, all right? So would he have to remove that first by going back again?
In circumstances where he has his umbilical attached, he has a tank on him as well, and he has to go further in the pipeline. Does he remove that, take it out, and then come back in?
He would have to make that call at that point in time, that diver.
Okay. What would
on his comfort level.
Right.
If he feels comfortable slipping by the tank
right.
and continue, that would be his call at that point in time.
In order to do it safely, what would your recommendation be? That he take it out?
Not really, not particularly.
Okay.
No.
But if he encountered more and more equipment, more and more tanks along the way, would you accept that continuing to enter further into the pipeline becomes more risky without removing those items?
Yes, that sounds logical. The more debris that's there is, the more things that can go wrong.
Yes. And in terms of entry into the pipeline, we've heard some evidence that if a diver were to go in, he would have to go feet first as opposed to head first. Would you agree with that? For the purpose of effecting a rescue.
That would depend on the diver.
Okay. Would your recommendation be feet first?
I am uncertain. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't. It would depend on the size of the diver as well.
Okay.
I would find a small diver. Small diver.
Find a small diver, yes.
Yeah, they are small divers.
Yes, I'm sure. Can I ask you this? I'd suggested to somebody else before that the first diver in, you've told us about having a wet tender at the 90-degree bend.
Yes.
And I was suggesting that it might be possible for the first diver to go in head first, the second diver feet first, so that when the first diver who's gone in is backing out, the second diver might be able to assist him. I mean, the problem is this, isn't it? On the one hand, you're going to effect a rescue much more effectively if you're head first.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
On the other hand, getting yourself out of the pipe afterwards, once let's say you found somebody and you're pulling them out, when you get to that bend, you've now got to come out. There's only one way out for you, and that's upside down, isn't it?
Yeah.
Your feet are going to be coming out of the top of the pipe first, and that might need somebody at the bend might be able to help you with that to a degree. But even that person's feet are, if they went in the way I'm suggesting, their feet would be at the wrong end, as it were. Yes.
Yes.
So I mean, it's really I can see why you're suffering with the same dilemma that I would. I mean, clearly it would be safer for that rescue diver to go in feet first. I think that I don't think there's any dispute between us on that. The question is how efficacious would it be for a diver to go in feet first at all to try and rescue someone? As it's been pointed out to us, that person may be injured. He may be feet first himself.
Correct.
Or feet aft, as it were. So it's foot to foot. What would you then be able to do in 30 inches of pipe?
And zero visibility.
Yeah, and maybe zero visibility, quite.
Not maybe, definitely.
Definitely. Well, we know that there was some water in the first part of the pipe, and that there was some visibility, because we've seen the camera going in with some visibility. So we know that there was, certainly to start with, some visibility. I'm not suggesting it's as good as it would be if you're just diving in the ocean, but it wasn't completely dark. It became that, I suspect, as it became thicker with oil. But yes, I mean, so you wouldn't make a judgment call on that. You'd leave that to the individual diver.
Individual diver at that point in time.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Matu.
Thank you, Mr. Fuentes. No further questions.
Okay.
Oh, hands are coming up now. Well, I'm not sure I'm going to allow this. You had your opportunity. You chose not to. Tell me what it is, please, that you want to ask, Miss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I actually did raise my hand when you asked
Not very high,
question.
obviously.
But I'm shorter than Mr. Mutu. I apologize.
All right, Ms. Alfonso. Do you have?
Right. I would not say that I raised my hand if I did not, in fact, raise my hand.
I wouldn't think that for a moment. If you did, I'm sure you did. And it's my fault for not seeing it.
And next time I will stand. So I said I'm not blessed with great height.
Very well. Of course, I will permit you, of course, to ask questions. Miss Alfonso will ask you some questions as well. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Fuentes.
Good afternoon.
My name is Nairi Alfonso, and I represent the interests of the SWWTU. I want to go back to that full contamination suit that you may or may not have seen some number of years ago in a warehouse. The purpose of, I don't understand, if you could assist me, the purpose of the contamination suit would be what?
To prevent oil from and other contaminants from making contact with the diver's skin. And it's mated to the hat, so it also prevents entry of gases or liquids accidentally into the diver's helmet.
Okay, so please assist me further, Mr. Fuentes. I imagine a commercial diver would be wearing a full wetsuit, yes?
Pardon?
I imagine a commercial diver would wear a full wetsuit.
Sometimes, not all the time.
Okay.
Sometimes they would just wear coveralls. Many divers in Trinidad only wear coveralls.
Okay, thank you for that. I really didn't know that.
Yeah.
Maybe too much television.
Okay.
So that if one of the commercial diver, if any commercial diver had to enter this pipeline, they could wear a full wetsuit. Would that not protect them, their skin from contact with the oil?
No, a wetsuit is porous material.
A wetsuit is porous material?
Yes.
That's why they call it a wetsuit as opposed to a dry suit.
I was just, and that was my next.
So the contamination suit he will actually be dry on the inside.
Okay, so my next question, the chairman just alluded to. Okay, so is an alternative to a wetsuit a dry suit?
An alternative?
Okay, so let me be clear. If it is that generally, I accept entirely what you say, Mr. Fuentes, that a full contamination suit is not generally available in Trinidad and Tobago.
Right.
So if a rescue had, or an entry, let me forget rescue, if an entry into this pipe had to be made.
Yes.
In default, for want of a better term, of having access to a full contamination suit? Could one wear a dry suit to protect the diver's skin, as you say?
Yes,
Okay,
provided it can mate to the helmet.
okay. But that would depend on what kind of equipment was available.
Yeah.
So it would be possible, and dry, okay, I should ask that question. Are dry suits generally available to a commercial diver in Trinidad?
No.
No?
Well, I don't know. I'm not certain if any contractors have them. I'm not privy to
Okay.
their
Mr. Friend,
assets. We don't use dry suits in Trinidad. The
Okay.
temperature is not required. We don't use it.
okay, it's for cold temperatures or some...
Freezing waters, yes.
freezing water, I got you.
Uncontaminated waters.
Uncontaminated
Yes.
waters. Okay. So, and I'm corrected by the chairman and yourself, and I'm thankful for that. So, a wetsuit would allow some interaction between the diver's skin and whatever he's diving in.
Yes.
Okay.
Not some. It's porous.
Okay, so a lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
Whatever is on the outside will get on the inside.
I see. Now, you spoke of the word contamination. We are talking about the contents of the pipe as contaminants. So, yes?
Yes.
Okay, so that is, I think if my reading was correct, I recall my early reading, that pipeline had previously carried crude oil. You know that to be true, or you don't know?
I believe I heard that. I cannot confirm it.
Okay. So let's say it's hydrocarbons. So it could be crude, it could be refined product,
Right.
but it will be some kind of hydrocarbon.
Hydrocarbons.
Okay.
And,
So,
and condensate.
and condensate. Now you're letting me know that I didn't do chemistry at high school.
Right.
Okay, so that being said, would there be a substantial danger to a diver exposed to that environment for an hour, 2 hours?
Oil is toxic,
Oil is toxic.
and it releases toxic fumes. It is toxic.
I'm aware of the toxic fumes.
Toxic, yeah.
But so if you got oil on your skin for an hour or two,
Miss, it is toxic.
well, okay. So
Toxic is poisonous.
okay, yes, but there are some things which are going to kill you that are toxic, and some things are not going to be so good for you and will not kill you. So let's start. So if you were exposed to what we believe might be the type of contents in this line for an hour or two, do you think with your experience of 23 years, I believe, or 24, that would lead to a fatality?
The possibility exists.
Or so that if a diver went down in a wetsuit into the environment, he will be exposed to death because oil is in contact with his skin.
Not only the oil, the fumes enter in his helmet, hydrogen sulfide. We have to assume the worst.
Okay, Mr. Fuentes, okay, so we spoke about umbilicals earlier, yes? The air that a rescue diver, or diver entering, I said I don't want to use rescue,
Right.
a diver entering that environment, the environment we think that was there, he will be breathing what? Not from the umbilical, his
Yes.
umbilical?
Yes.
Air, I'm sure that's not the
yes,
technical
air from
term.
his umbilical
Okay.
through the helmet, yes.
Okay, so are you suggesting that noxious fumes from the line contents would be he would be breathing that instead of what's in the umbilical?
It is possible. Because depending on the diver positions himself and the angle he looks up, things like that, fumes can enter the helmet through the neck down.
Okay. So,
Or liquids in this case.
Mr. Fuentes, so these full dive helmets and the lighter versions that they have now, which are, band mask and so on,
Yeah.
those allow external liquids and
Yes.
fumes to enter?
Yes.
Can I offer some clarification?
It can happen. It happens.
I would be happy.
Yes, I'd like to offer some clarification. What you're trying to refer to is called norm, and it is a consideration if you're going to dive into pipeline. Norm, the acronym is naturally occurring radioactive material, and you'd find that type of material within pipelines with the vintage in Paria. It is a hazard that divers would have to take into account if entering that pipeline. Without a hazmat suit and KMB mask, and the mask that you're referring to, they are being phased out in terms of being used for the exact reason that is being identified. You'd have a lot more ingression coming in with that band mask. I agree with you that you'd be breathing air from the surface, but norm is a credible factor that has to be considered when entering a pipeline of the vintage that we have at Paria. Yeah?
Okay, thank you for that, Commissioner Wilson. So, Mr. Fuentes, Mr. Boudram, who came out of the pipeline after more than 2.5 hours. And he did come out covered in oil, so I'm not suggesting that he didn't come out with some material from the inside the pipeline. It does, I want to be hesitant to say he was carried to hospital in an ambulance. He was treated at the San Fernando General Hospital. I think if I follow from his evidence, he remained with much of that oil on him for a day or two. I don't know, maybe perhaps the hospital didn't have. Three. I'm corrected by the chairman. So he was exposed to the same environment that we are theorizing what it would be, because clearly it had water in the pipe.
I just want to know where this is going. What the witness has said, just a moment, Mr. Fuentes, what the witness has said is that in order for him to ameliorate the risks as he saw it, he identified to Mr. Mutu 3 separate features, one of which included a contaminated water, full contamination suit. That's my note of it. What I understand him to mean by that is he would want to consider a suit that would be able to protect the diver from the very thing that Mr. Wilson has identified called norm. As I understand it, a relatively new phenomenon, not new in its existence, but recognized as a potential danger. And a perfectly reasonable concern, it seems to me. Does it really matter whether or not the particular suit lets in a little bit on one side, or a little bit on another side, or does it really matter what the basis of that contamination is? He's just giving you his opinion as an expert of 24 years that that is a consideration and that it should be considered. I'm not sure what you're asking. What is it you want him to say?
Well, there's nothing that I want him to say, because I said Mr. Fuentes is a diver and I am not. But
yeah, but if you're asking medical types of questions, I'm not going to answer.
I'm not asking any medical type question.
What is it you want?
If Mr. Fuentes has indicated that it would be toxic and lead to death to have this, whatever the line contents, to be in contact with the line contents.
Well, you're not suggesting it's not toxic, are you?
No, but certainly, as I said, there's some things that are toxic, but if you're exposed to them for a short period of time, they will most certainly not kill you.
Look, the bleach next to my lavatory seat is toxic. That's not really the point, is it? What Mr. Fuentes is saying is that it is a proper consideration before asking a diver to go into a pipeline with material of that kind. And so that's fine.
Well, then let me ask Mr. Fuentes that direct question, then, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Fuentes, if these things that you have outlined this afternoon were present, all the tenders, tenders in the water, the tender on proper umbilicals, proper air compressors, and so on, and the only divers suiting that was available would be a wetsuit, would you be able to advise or would you be able to advise on a dive plan to go into a pipeline like that with that equipment, minus the full contamination suit? Because we say that's not available, and the dry suit is not generally available or in use in Trinidad.
Miss, you've confused me with that question.
Okay.
Sorry,
my
I'm
fault.
afraid.
Please
Can I see if I can help? Mr. Fuentes, I think what's being asked of you is this. All other things being equal, would you have been in a position, do you think, to have given some sort of dive plan for this rescue if you had been asked?
Could you say that once
Yes.
more, Mr. Lynch?
Do you think you would have been able, if you had been asked, would you have been able to come up with your own dive plan for a rescue? Do you think you would have been able to do that if someone had asked you?
I would have had to been, for me to do that rescue, I think I would have been, I needed to have been a supervisor
Yes.
there and then at
Yes.
that point in time.
On the berth?
Yes.
Yes.
At the time of the incident.
Right. So when it
And for the-
actually happened?
And for the few minutes afterwards, the 5-10 minutes after that, then I could have attempted a rescue.
A rescue plan?
But,
Right.
yeah, but
Yeah. Well, whether it would go ahead or not would depend on a number of factors, which you've already identified in answer to Mr. Maharaj and to Mr. Mutu and to me. All right? And I think everybody understands that this is not straightforward on any view. And you've been very fair in identifying things that concerned you as an expert before you would consider going to that. Now, can I ask you this, which arises a little from what has been asked of you? I get the impression, so I need you to correct that if I've got it wrong, all right?
Okay.
I get the impression that the things that you have identified would ameliorate and mitigate some of the dangers as you saw them, all right? But that much of that would also depend on the individual diver. Would he be prepared to take this risk or that risk or whatever it is? And it would be a matter for him having pointed out what those risks are.
absolutely.
Would you agree with that?
It would be a personal decision on that diver at that point in time.
Right. So, for example, foot first, head first, that sort of thing.
Yes.
Whether he wears a particular type
Are
of
you
suit.
willing to go?
Sorry? Are you willing to
willing
go?
to go?
I got you, yes, yeah. That nobody could be ordered to
No.
go into the pipe,
No,
could they?
can't.
You wouldn't conceive of that, I imagine.
And
All right.
as a supervisor, I would not ask anyone to go
No.
where I would not go myself.
Right. And you might even say to them, look, this is not a good idea. Please don't do it.
Yeah.
I want to do it. Please let me go. You'd say, well, it's on you. Would that be a fair way of putting it?
No, if I say no,
If you say no, that's
no
it.
is no.
Right. So, because you're the dive supervisor.
Yeah.
So once you say no, that cuts
That's
it off
it.
completely. No matter what they might
No
say.
matter what it is.
I got you, right. And you would not be prepared to put together a plan unless you were the dive supervisor.
Correct.
Got you. Thank you very much for that. Miss,
One more
yes.
question, Mr. Chairman.
Right, thank you.
Mr. Fuentes, diving into a confined area like this pipe that is now the subject of this inquiry, isn't that called penetration diving?
Yes.
Okay. Isn't the most common form of penetration diving into something like a pipe, something enclosed where you don't have direct access to the surface?
It happens. There are instances, yes.
There are instances.
Yeah.
And
But as I said, divers don't go into pipelines.
Yeah.
That is not a thing.
what? Sorry.
Divers do not go into pipelines.
Okay.
That is not done.
So the reason that I asked particularly about penetration diving and the whether it would include going into an area like the pipe, because you said it wasn't a thing.
For example, a wreck on a seabed,
Yes.
diver go and makes entry into it through a hatch. That is
Yeah,
penetration. That is what we call, that's penetration diving.
Well, I wonder where I got my information with respect to penetration diving and so on was and I want to get I hate acronyms, ADCI International Consensus for Commercial Diving and Underwater Operations. You familiar with that standard?
Yeah.
Okay, so they actually say the classic example of penetration diving is diving into a pipeline. and moving along the horizontal in a pipeline in particular.
That was an example they gave. But
They say it's a classic example. I
it
want to
was
be
an
faithful.
example, but it was not a contaminated pipeline with oil, and there was no possibility of a delta P. That's what that document you refer to is, it refers to an ideal situation. This was not.
And it also provides, to be fair, in the same guidelines for diving where delta P scenarios have happened and are possible. You would agree?
Could you repeat the last bit?
Okay. That same standard that I carried you to also provides diving in situations where there have been delta Ps or where delta Ps are possible or probable or could occur. Would you agree? That same AD.
Well, I'm going to
ADCI.
stop this again, I'm afraid, Ms. Alfonso,
Please,
because like Mr. Fuentes, I'd like my own file, which had the document in it. If you're going to refer to a document like this, you really do need to have it given to us in advance. We can put it on the screen, and then everybody can understand exactly what it is you're saying. Because, you know, making that assertion, and I'm sure you're reading it accurately, but we need to read around it as well. And very often there are things, as you know, which might help answer the question. So if you're going to rely on this, I would ask you to provide it to us. We can put it on the screen. We can see what it says. And
I have it here.
I should have guessed. He has it.
I really do.
I'm sure you do. Yeah. And if you tell me you do, I'm sure you do.
Mr. Chairman, in our defense, we have in fact supplied or assisted Dr. Glenn Chady with a witness statement which contains the extracts of that particular manual.
Yes, well, I haven't got his statement. Look, Ms. Alfonso, really, if we're going to be dealing with this specifically, I must have the document. I must have it in advance. I don't want it sprung on me now. I'm grateful to Mr. Fuentes for having it with him, but it's no use to me as a complete layperson to see a document like that just handed in without my being given an opportunity to read it myself. And I would wish to do that. Now, if you want to rely on this, you're going to have to get the copy to us. We can have it for Monday, and then we can see where we can take it from there. And I won't stop you making any submissions about it in the opportunity that you're going to be given next week to make submissions. I'm not sure that Mr. Fuentes can help you. If it's contained in the document, it's contained in the document, and you can refer to it. But you'll need to supply it to us, all right?
And I'm just indicating, Mr. Chairman, that we have, and I'm accepting immediately that it is belatedly, but that is because, as I said, we're only assisting somebody in putting in a witness statement.
Well, I'm not moaning about it being late. I'm concerned about cross-examination of a witness which I'm supposed to follow and everybody else is supposed to follow without having the document. So if you want to provide the document and then make your points on it, please do.
I accept that, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you very much. Do I take it that's your questions then?
Yes, indeed. Thank you very
Yes,
much.
I think, Mr. Ramadar, you wanted to jump in after your turn.
Well,
What is it you want to ask?
very simply this. We heard about snags, and I just want to explore the
You want to explore what?
issue of the snagging, the ability to snag on the umbilical.
Well, why didn't you ask it when it was your turn?
Well, it only came out under cross from...
No, but that's not how it works. You know that's not how it works.
I'm entirely in your hands.
Mr.
I can get it from
Ramadar, you
another
know
witness.
that you have an order. We have an order in which this is being done, and you're out of order to seek to make the cross-examination after Mr. Mutu has.
Well, with all due
Are
respect...
you applying to go out of turn as an exception to the normal rule to be allowed to cross-examine this witness after Mr. Mutu? Is that your application?
It is.
Tempting though it is to refuse it, I'm going to allow you. Don't do it again.
No, I shan't, and I'm hardly out of order before the chairman. It is simply this, Mr. Fuentes. You speak of the angle into the pipe where
It's called a 90-degree bend.
90-degree bend, but it is not, as far as you're aware, is it, a literal 90-degree bend? It's an elbow, isn't it?
It's a curve,
A curve.
yes.
And the likelihood of snagging on a curve is far less than a sharp-edged corner, isn't it?
And umbilicals are caught on the side of a ship. A simple thing as the side of a ship will
Yeah.
snag an umbilical.
Right. And in the perfect world, none of that would occur, the snagging and so. But you appreciate that this is not a perfect world, and it was not a perfect scenario that evening.
Correct.
And lives were at stake.
Yes.
And therefore risks needed to be taken. It was not a perfect environment. You agree with that? Lives were
I
at
don't
stake.
agree.
Lives
The
were at stake.
risk needed to be taken is subjective.
Of course.
Yeah, yeah.
And as you rightly pointed out, it depends on the willingness of the person, the diver themselves, as to what they're willing to take, risk-wise.
In all safety courses, first aid courses that we go through, we are always taught make the area safe
Correct.
first before you render assistance to anyone.
And
that doesn't specify if it's your family,
Yeah.
friend, or your foe,
Yeah.
right?
I appreciate all
Make
that.
it safe.
We appreciate that. But they do the best one can to save lives is the highest priority, isn't it?
Sorry?
Do the best that one can. to
Preservation
save-
of life, of course.
Thank you so much. And in terms
That
of...
includes the rescuer.
And exactly the point. So that the rescuer is entitled to make that decision, in a large part too, for his own well-being, what he considers too risky or safe enough, or worth the risk.
Please repeat that, sir.
Of course.
Please.
There is a personal decision to be made by the rescuer
Well,
that it may be too risky, it
That-
may not be risky at all, or
Right.
it was worth the risk.
yes, but that is only after the dive team agrees to make the dive. One diver
No,
can't
we
just
know
decide,
that, we
I'm
know
going to
that.
dive and rescue.
We-
The dive team, the supervisor in charge, come up with a plan and make this
Thank
rescue.
you. We appreciate
Not-
all of that. But at
Right.
the end of the day, there are a lot of personal decisions to be made. Because the supervisor could say, yes, I agree. But the diver himself could say, no, I do not.
Yes,
Or the diver himself could say, yes, I will.
correct.
Correct. Now, did you have any idea how far they needed to go into the pipe to do any rescue?
If I had an idea,
Yes.
they would, no, I had,
Absolutely.
I had no clue.
Right. Clueless. So in terms of the distance that one had to go will determine the level of danger to the rescuer, isn't it? The further you have
The
to go.
further, the more dangerous.
Beautiful. And the less one had to go would be less risk. Yeah?
Less likelihood of a risk.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And in terms of to save 4 lives, maybe 150 feet into a pipe, right? With all the risks and possible risks that you would have identified, do you think that was way too much to ask? To save 4 lives to go into 150 feet of pipe?
I'm not sure it's a fair question. He doesn't have all
No,
of the facts of the particular
that is so
scenario.
true.
He was never
Yeah.
appraised of them, and I do think it's a little unfair to
All right, I don't want to
ask
be
him
unfair.
to answer that question.
I can't answer that, Mr. Ramadan.
Of course,
Sorry.
I appreciate it may appear unfair, but as we
Well, I've just said it is.
yes. Thank you.
As,
All right.
as I said before, the time for rescue would have been
Long gone, of
immediate.
course. And therefore, what you're looking at here, and that's the point, I'm so grateful, Mr. Chairman, is more academic now looking back on it. You didn't have to deal with it in the moment. You agree? Dealing with it in the moment where there's a possibility of saving lives, very different from looking back upon it almost academically. Textbook, isn't it? You agree that?
Yeah.
But the Friday evening when they were alive was not a textbook environment that we had to deal with. You had to deal with real world circumstances, correct? Yeah?
Yeah, well, lives were at stake.
Thank you. And therefore, rescue should have been a high priority, and a risk, of course, attends to that.
Again, preservation of life.
Thank you. Both sides.
Both
Thank you so
sides.
much, Mr. Chairman.
Good afternoon, Mr. Fuentes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Wilson.
Yes, we do. I've just been advised by my chairman I need to say that we know each other from previous jobs and get, you recognize me?
Don't say who are you.
All right. I just want to ask you a few questions coming out of the inquiry in the room. I have an appreciation you wasn't there on Friday, but because of the conversations came into the room, I just want to also bring clarity to the room using your expertise, if I may, and or your opinions. We're talking about the listing that, or the components of a rescue that you would consider that needed to be had. What I want to interrogate is, once we're planning dives, do we have to consider the manning levels? Or manning levels of,
Yes,
in your opinion, what is the manning level if a rescue had to be enacted as you're describing, utilizing the components you have?
Seven, eight.
I would have come on some right as well. Now, because we, in that scenario that you were describing to the inquiry, utilizing surface air,
Yeah.
and in-water tenders, we have to, or would you consider the ingress point umbilicals have to go in the pipeline for in-water tenders to facilitate traversing the horizontal of the pipeline?
Yeah.
You would?
Yeah.
So that pipeline is about 30 inches. How many people would be ingressing the pipeline with umbilicals under the scenario which you were interrogated under?
Anyone, well, they would all be on umbilicals.
Correct. Okay, fair enough. So now I want to kind of, I'm trying to picture the umbilicals going in ingress in a 30-inch pipeline.
Bring your microphone a little closer to yourself. Yeah.
So having an in-water tender in the pipeline, umbilicals going into the pipeline, would you consider if that now, two divers now going in ingress point would pose some sort of restricted access or restricted movement of the umbilicals?
Yes.
Okay. And restricted access versus confined space, is there a difference?
Yes.
Okay. Do you care to explain the difference?
So, physically confined space and a physically confining space. That's what you asked, right? That's the difference.
Yeah, your comment did make
Okay,
sense. I
so
listened to you.
for example, if this room were a storage tank or oil separator on land, not designed for human occupation, and there's a small entry hatch, and you have to go in, you have to unbolt it, enter to go inside to do an inspection. That's confined space entry.
I'm following you so far.
If you ask that same inspector, just say we're working on land now, right, on the surface, on the dry. You ask that same inspector to go inside a 30-inch pipeline to inspect it. It is a confined space entry, but it's also a physically confining space where he cannot rotate 180 degrees.
Understood. Yes.
And that's the difference.
Okay, thank you for that. So, with that restricted access into the pipeline, I now want to go to the positioning of a potential rescue diver going in. You as a supervisor heard it come out into the room. If one was to come across some sort of debris, like a tank and stuff, if you would pass it along the body. Now, I want to walk you through that. You are the dive supervisor. We have communications. We have all the things, as Mr. Ramadan said, in the perfect world. We have the communication, so your diver indicates to you topside suit come across something, appears to be a tank.
scuba tank,
Yes.
right.
Given this restricted access, given the umbilicals, his equipment in a 30-inch pipeline, as a supervisor, he might want to pass that past his body, but you having direct communication with the potential rescue diver, and as a supervisor, ultimately, do you have the responsibility for that diver?
Yes.
Would you advise him to pass the bottle beyond him, given the restricted access that we envisioning, and/or would you advise him to come out with the bottle?
It would depend.
Okay.
If he could slip by easily, because remember, this is a rescue time. Is of
And
the
that's what I'm
essence.
saying, with
So
the restricted access.
If he could slip by easily enough for his comfort, go for
So let me provoke you a little more.
it. Yes.
Are you seeing if he could slip by easily? Are you just going to take his word? Or are you prepared to take that responsibility? Because debris could now have that diver.
As a supervisor,
Yeah.
listening to my divers, I would be able to make that judgment call at that
Understood.
point in time.
Okay, so thank you for that.
All right.
So well, I need to understand that,
Okay.
because if what you're saying, or what I understood you to say earlier, was that this is a matter for the individual diver. If he felt comfortable doing it, that is, slip by that tank, you would be comfortable.
Yeah.
If he had any hesitation about it, you might say, look, I think the best thing is to get rid of that tank, let's take it out.
Yes.
And that's the approach you would take with
Yes.
all debris that he might come across.
Yes.
You just said, in answer to the question by Mr. Wilson, that your concern is that the diver himself might be thinking, time is of the essence, and therefore I am prepared to go past this tank and
As
look
is.
for to rescue the men that are beyond it.
Yeah.
And of course, it would be cumulative, as I think Mr. Mutu suggested before, that if there were more than one tank, once you get to the second one, now it becomes a potential bigger problem. The more debris there is, the more of a problem might exist.
Yes.
But at each point, in the first instance, your view is, as the dive supervisor, that it would be up to the individual diver to make a judgment call. And frankly, he shouldn't be in that pipe if he wasn't capable of making that judgment call. Is that the position?
Combined with my interpretation of that judgment call.
Of what he says, yes,
Yes,
exactly.
how he says
Yeah,
it.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I entirely accept. Ultimately, if you say no, that's it.
Yeah.
Yes, I get it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr.
All right, yeah, so I wanted to go with the responsibility. So now I want to deal with the positioning of a potential rescue diver and potential fouling, because, again, debris in the pipeline, potential for
Yes.
fouling. So that's why I was saying if you're taking responsibility of passing debris and the diver continuing. But as I said, you're prepared to take that responsibility. If a diver goes head first and he has an in-water tender, and for some unforeseen reason he goes unconscious, would you consider retrieving that diver from that position, an unconscious diver? Physics and physiology, his legs would pose a problem pulling him back this direction.
It is possible, yes.
So the positioning of the diver is a serious consideration into a potential rescue.
Yes.
I would even offer, I don't know of your awareness that there are special harnesses for, as the lady from the SWTU for dives, Miss Alfonso, so, you know, he's good with not remembering names. I could never remember it. Mistake and can't remember. So, so more so to your articulation around penetration dives. In order, in the unlikely event that a penetration dive needs to be engaged.
Right.
All right. Most penetration dives, in your opinion and experience, they have been so processed out, it's only advised to do to known standards practices
Yes.
and to try and do, because we have a saying in industry, safety is written in blood. Yes.
Correct.
Yes, so that's in our industry, safety is written in blood,
Yes, it
which
is.
drives a lot of the processes, procedures, standards, and trade associations by which we practice our trade.
Absolutely.
So in order to execute a penetration dive, that requires a substantial amount of planning. In your opinion, would you agree?
So procedure and heavily risk assessed. Yes.
And is it a common thing in industry to dive into a pipeline?
Into a pipeline?
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
He said it's not a thing.
Yeah.
It's not a thing.
Well, again, the standards address it. So they address if we have to go into a pipeline. So, but to your knowledge, where I was going with it is, to your knowledge, do those standards employ any or communicate any limitations in the event divers have to do a penetration dive? Like limitations on the...
Umbilical length and stuff like that?
No, like maybe the diameter of a pipeline.
Not that
Yeah.
I'm not aware of. No.
Okay.
I don't recall seeing a limitation onto the size of being allowed to.
Well, there's a physical limitation.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's a 12-foot pipe, 12-inch pipe,
Yeah.
you're not going to be able to get it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a physical limitation.
Yeah,
I think what
but
Mr.
I don't
Wilson's
think there's
asking.
a written
Yeah.
Okay.
physical limitation in any.
Sure. I mean, obviously, a
So, yeah.
50-inch pipe would be a lot easier.
Yes.
Because you could turn around in it. Whereas a 30-inch pipe, you can't.
Yes. So where I was going was if you are aware of any known recommended practices in terms of penetration diving.
There's some reference in the ADCI documents
Yes.
and IMCA documents,
Yeah.
which both state they must be heavily risk assessed and all risk removed before doing such.
And at the end of the year, even in addition to that, there's a recommendation in our own voluntary guideline in the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau standard. So thank you, Mr. Fuentes.
Okay.
All right.
Mr. Maharaj? No. Does anybody have anything arising from Mr. Wilson's questions?
Yes.
Just 1 minute.
There's only one question. Is there a limitation to your mind, whether by way of standard or even applying your own experience? Is there a limitation on the length of an umbilical that you would use for a penetration dive? And if so, what would that be?
I do not recall ever seeing a limitation, a stated, a numerical limitation on a penetration dive.
Oh.
The excursion limit would be based on the length of umbilical. The longer, the more umbilical divers paid out, more risk. There's more risk attached. You want him closer. The further away he is, means he's further away from being able to be rescued.
Right, but in your, what I'm asking is in your experience, is there a limitation that you would say, right, I am not going to engage in an activity for a penetration dive that requires an umbilical greater than X? And if so, what would X be?
That would be a judgment call by the supervisor at the point in time on the job, depending on the job, on the scenario. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, there's obviously an outer limit, isn't there? I mean, you wouldn't want an umbilical that was a mile long.
No.
No, quite. So there's an outer limit. Precisely where that limit is would depend on the circumstance.
Yes.
I mean, here we know that there would be a couple of bends for it at least to go around in order to get into the horizontal section of the pipe.
Right.
Once in the horizontal section of the pipe, we know two things. It's very slippery, so one assumes that would make it easier for the pipe to pass, the umbilical to pass along, and it is straight, which it also makes it easier.
Yes.
But it's still got to get around these bends, hasn't
Yes.
it, before it gets there. So I mean, really, I think Mr. Mutu is asking you, are you able to put a sort of final length on what you would regard as safe if you were in the position as being the supervisor on the day?
Off the top of my head, 50 or 100 feet.
Right. So once
It's
you're
so much,
once you're up there,
and that's in an ideal situation without contamination and without delta
Right.
P possibility.
So the realities are that you would be very reluctant for anyone to go beyond, particularly in this scenario where you've got a number of contaminants clearly in that pipe.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of it was water. We know that that was the case, but there was clearly contaminants in there as
Yes.
well.
There will be.
Yeah,
I
we
don't
know
think
there
the line was pigged. Was the line pigged and clean? No, I
No.
doubt that very much.
No.
So, no.
No, it wasn't.
Right.
So the line was supposed to be full. It clearly wasn't. And that's what caused, I suspect, the delta P.
That's the problem.
Yeah, but so the issue really is once you've got to that 90-degree bend, how far would you allow someone to go along the pipe before you say, well, you know, I think that's probably far enough, yeah. And you're saying the outer limit is about 100 feet.
If I was supervising a diver,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, off the top of my head,
Thank
yes.
you. I hope that helps, Mr. Mutu. Yeah.
Yes, very much. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Maharaj, any other questions? Well, in spite of your reluctance, if I may say so, Mr. Fuentes, you've been very helpful. Thank you very much indeed for coming. I appreciate it.
I try to be helpful to everyone.
Well, yes, well, certainly you have been since you've been here.
But
All right, thank you.
It's the wording.
Please take your file with you, and you're free to go. As I say, you can stay or go as you please. Can we take 5 minutes before we have the next witness, please?
Sorry?
Thank you. Yes, just go that way.
All rise.
Who we got next?
The next witness is Mr. Osai Fleming Holder.
Ah, yes. Page? 1490. 1490. Here we go.
Sorry.
Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Fleming
Hi, good
Holder. Take the oath, please.
I
I,
state your name.
O.C. Fleming Holder,
Solemnly swear
solemnly swear
that the evidence
that the evidence
I shall give
I shall give
to this commission
to this commission
in this case
in this case
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth. Thank you.
Yes. Sorry to have kept you quite so long, but hopefully I intend to deal with you today, all right, so that you'll be free to go. So first thing is this, Mr. Fleming Holder, who is it that's going to do the summary? All right, so Mr. Bissessar here is going to summarize your evidence, all right? Please listen carefully and see if you agree with his summary, all right? If not, you'll tell me afterwards. And then once he's finished, Mr. Maharaj has a few questions for you, and then there'll be questions, I suspect, from one or two others of the lawyers that are here, all right?
Sure,
That's
no
going to be
problem.
the procedure. We're aiming for 5:30, all right?
Okay.
So everyone have that in mind. That would be helpful. Yes, Mr. Bissessar.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Fleming Holder, I understand you, before I summarize your evidence, that you wish to make an adjustment to paragraph 27 of your witness statement.
Correct. The
Then-
time that was stated there is
Just 1 second, it's being brought up. At 27 reads, at around approximately 8 p.m., I was called by Colin to the office next to the open area, the shipping building. Is that the sentence that you wish to make a correction to?
No, that was the one with Budram's, the time that I was called.
Oh, I see.
So that was
Perhaps
9:55.
If you can look at the screen and just tell us at what line of paragraph 27 and the correction.
Yes, that was the section he read. So at around approximately 8 p.m., you want to change the 8 p.m. to 9:55? It's pretty precise. Did you get that from somewhere else? Yes, all right. We're going to change it from 8 p.m. to 9:55, is it? That's correct. All right, thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Bissessar.
Thank you so much, Chairman. Good. Mr. Fleming Holder is the Operations HSSE Manager at Heritage and served as Incident Commander at Heritage from 13th December 2021 to 23rd January 2022. He says he is trained in major emergency management. Mr. Fleming Holder provided a witness statement dated 22nd September 2022, that's at WB 1490, to the Commission, but declined to be interviewed by counsel to the Commission. At about 4:45 p.m. on Friday, 25th February 2022, Mr. Fleming Holder received a telephone call advising of an incident at Paria and that it required his support, as a result of which, at 5:33 p.m., he reported to Paria's shipping building, spending most of the time at the Incident Command Post, ICP. He said he attended meetings and discussions held by the ICT and Mr. Colin Piper as Incident Commander. He also described his first meeting with the ICT that Friday at 6:08 p.m., during which he was the only Heritage representative present, and says that there was a scribe taking notes of the discussions. Mr. Fleming Holder says that he reported the ICT discussions to the Heritage executive team, comprising its CEO, Arlene Chow, and Chief Operating Officer, Patricia King. Mr. Fleming Holder describes being part of some of the ICT meetings and that plans changed as scenarios did, so that after the rescue of Christopher Boudran, the ICT's plans also changed to search and rescue in the pipeline. He explains that following Boudran's rescue, the ICT discussed different options and plans, including 1, to determine the conditions inside the pipeline via borescope and cameras, 2, to send in a rescue team into the pipeline, 3, to pump down the line so that it would be emptied of fluid, and then to send a rescue team inside the dry pipeline, and 4, to cut the pipeline to extract the divers. Mr. Fleming Holder said that on Friday at 6:15 p.m., he attended a virtual meeting of Heritage's executive team to update them and was instructed to provide whatever support was required by the ICT and to focus on logistics. Mr. Fleming Holder said he then requested a dive vessel, and Heritage responded by sending 2 vessels, the Gulfstream and the Spearfish. Mr. Fleming Holder also made requests for underwater lights, confined space entry experts, and pumps. He also explained that the main risks to a person entering the pipeline was becoming stuck, and he began to document the draft risk assessment, but was called back to the ICP by Paul Yearwood and never completed the risk assessment. He said that on Friday at about 8 p.m., he was in a room with someone holding a cell phone that was on speaker, and he was informed that the person on the line was Christopher Boudran, who had been rescued, and he heard Boudran saying that, 1, he was 80 feet down the horizontal side of the pipeline, 2, there was only 1 person behind him, 3, he passed young Kaz who looked broken up, 4, he got through and got to the vertical section of the pumps, and 5, Faisal Kurban helped him. Mr. Fleming Holder recalls that the call lasted about 3 to 5 minutes, and Colin Piper led the conversation, which was heard by the other persons in the room, including Michael Y., Randy Archibald, Mustaq Mohammed, Paul Yearwood, and Narissa. Heritage's dive supervisor, Rolf Seals, arrived at about 9 p.m., and Mr. Fleming Holder took him to the ICP and updated him, and was informed that 2 dive teams were on their way. Mr. Fleming Holder then described events in the ICP and discussions in relation to Mitchell's Diving, Offshore Technology Services Limited, that's OTSL, HHSL, and Eastern Divers Limited. He said that on Saturday, 26 February 2022, at about 1:08 a.m., he recalls Rolf Seals informing the ICT that based on his review of the video footage, that the dive supervisors from OTSL and Mitchell's said that the risk was too high to deploy their divers. Later, Mr. Vieira of HHSL, after unsuccessfully deploying their line crawler, said that HHSL was unable to perform a rescue of the divers. Later, on Saturday, 26 February 2022, he says in preparation for returning to Paria for the night shift, he called Raul Arno, Heritage's operations and maintenance manager, who told him that Eastern Divers had said, based on a mock-up of a confined space entry into the pipeline, that Eastern Divers had prepared, they were not able to perform a rescue. He reported to the ICP for the night shift at about 10:03 p.m., but there was not much in terms of logistics support for him to provide at that stage. Mr. Fleming Holder continued providing logistics support to the ICT on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and finally Thursday, 3rd March 2021, during which time he updated the Heritage executive team. Mr. Fleming Holder, do you agree that what I have presented is a fair and accurate summary of your witness statement dated 22nd September 2022 as amended today?
Yes, with one clarification. So when I left, this is Rolano's feedback. When I left that Saturday morning, the instructions to Eastern Divers was to perform a mock-up. When Roll gave me the handover, he said that it was too risky for them to enter. They never did the mock-up. So that's just one correction.
Can I be clear, is that a correction to this statement or a correction generally?
So that's a correction to the truth, basically. So when I left Paria, right? The last instruction.
Which day are we talking about?
This is Saturday.
This is on Saturday, right?
Correct. So when I left Paria, the last, in my handover to Roll, Eastern Divers were supposed to do a mock-up in a 30-inch to ensure that they could perform the rescue, right?
Yes.
When I was handed over, Roll told me that they could not perform the rescue, so I thought that they did the mock-up. So I'm just correcting the statement based on that fact.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Yes, Mr. Maharaj.
Good afternoon, sir.
I just want to ask you a few questions. At paragraph 4 of your witness statement, you said you served as an incident commander at Heritage from 2021 to January 2022.
That is correct.
I want some help from you. From your experience as an incident commander, would you say that the incident command team, one of the main purposes of it is to prepare for an emergency?
Yes, it is, by conducting drills and also checking their emergency response plans.
And to conduct drills in respect of a possible emergency scenario?
So it's based on risk scenarios, that is correct.
Yes. And in Heritage, whilst you were there, how often you would say the incident command team performed and conduct drills?
So you have two factors in terms of drills, right? So you have your field operations team, this is Heritage. You have your incident command team, and you have your business continuity, your BST.
Sorry, hang on, I want to make a note there. Field operations team.
Field operations team, which will deal with emergencies on a site, right?
On the site.
Correct. Your IMT is called in based on the extent of the emergency, if your FOT cannot handle that emergency, and your BST is also called in based on business continuity.
Field operations team. What was the other team?
IMT and BST.
Thank you.
So the field operation team would be the team that would have the drills in respect to, let's say if you have a Delta P.
So your field operations, so we're talking Heritage here now, right?
I know, I talk in
Right.
Heritage.
So in your
too.
field operations team, you will drill based on a drill matrix, right? So you may drill based on severe weather, fire, gas release, etc. And that is to really check preparedness, maintaining a state of readiness to ensure that what are the gaps from your emergency response, you highlight them and you close them out so that you always remain ready in the event of an emergency.
Well, let me ask a more focused question.
Sure.
Right? As far as Heritage concerned, did it ever consider there would be a scenario for Heritage to have a drill? I'm not talking about Paria, for Heritage to have a drill for Delta P.
It would be based on a job or project. If you have a job or project, you go through based on what is the risk, right? You look at what are the scenarios, what is the methodology, you go through that, and then you develop a ERP to suit the job or project.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this then. Has Heritage, since you were there as an incident commander of the team, ever had a drill for a scenario of a Delta P hazard?
No.
No. Okay.
Mr. Maharaj asked you a few questions back, how often you would drill.
So in Heritage, we drill at least once a month, right? In prior companies where I would have worked, would drill every 2 weeks, 2 drills per week. So I've been an incident commander probably for the last 11 years in different companies.
The importance of drilling you've explained, because you
Correct.
need to be ever ready in a hazardous environment in which you're working.
Correct. You live on a time bomb.
Yeah, thank you. Well put, if I may say so. So there's really no difference in these terms when you're dealing with a site that is Heritage's or indeed a site that is Paria's.
Correct. You need to do drills in order to make sure that you can deal with emergencies. Emergencies are your last line of defense, and you need plans to make sure that you could deal
So
with
if there
them.
hadn't been a drill at your, say you joined a firm and you discovered in your role in that firm as operations manager that there hadn't been a drill for a year, what would be your reaction?
I would intervene with CCMER. We would sit down with the frontline teams, and we would make sure and start drilling. Would attend the drills, would see what are the feedback and see what are the closure of actions.
Yeah. What would be your initial reaction on discovering that there hadn't been a drill for a year?
Well, you understand why there's no drill, and then you show the methodology of why the importance of drilling.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Mr. Fleming.
Good afternoon.
In all those drills that you've just identified at Heritage, did you ever drill with Paria in a scenario as supporting Paria?
Negative, no.
Thank you.
At paragraph 16 and 17 of your witness statement, you stated that you refers to being requested by Colin Piper and Randy Archibald to do a risk assessment for the possible rescue of the divers from inside the pipe. Okay?
That is correct.
Was that risk assessment ever done?
So the risk assessment was started. So when Rolf came, he was briefed by myself, Paul, and then he was briefed by the IC, which is Mr. Colin Piper. After that, he asked for us to do a risk assessment since we had the dive expert on board with us. We then left that building, the shipping building, and went to HSC, which is the HSC building, which is probably 20 feet from the building. And then we sat down, we contacted Ms. Catherine Balkisoon, and we had a discussion and started the risk assessment. Yes.
Well,
Item number 17 details.
Sorry, I want to keep a note of this because it's quite important.
Yeah.
Just so that I understand, you're using first names. Not everybody is as familiar with them as you are.
Okay, so
Paul and Rolf.
So Colin Piper, Randy Archibald is who made the request.
Right.
Paul Yearwood and
Right.
Catherine Balkisoon.
Right.
Rolf, myself, and Paul went to the safety office to start the risk assessment.
Thank you.
Paul then left. Rolf, myself, Catherine, and another person on the line, and we were doing a risk assessment looking at the different scenarios with respect to how could you safely rescue somebody within the pipeline. That
So-
started at approximately 9:10 p.m. that night.
9:10 p.m.
Correct.
on the Friday night.
That's correct.
So after Paul had left, it's you, Rolf, and Catherine Balkisoon.
And I had another person on the line, I can't remember the name as well, with Catherine. That was on the barge.
Right, but those two were together on
Correct.
the barge. Do you remember who they represented, even if you can't remember their name?
So I know Catherine represented Paria, but I
Right.
can't remember who was the next individual, but we were doing a risk assessment at that time.
Right, was it someone who was a diver?
We had Rolf, who was the diver.
Right, Rolf
that
was your
point-
diver.
At,
But
at
the-
that point in time.
The person at the other end, was it from a diving company or?
I can't
You
remember.
can't, all right, very well. Thank you. Mr.
Right. Now, in your statement, you said the risk assessment was not done because the need for the risk assessment was overtaken by what emerged in the video footage which was obtained by the ICT of inside the pipeline as described later in the statement.
So just to correct that, so while we were doing the risk assessment, right, Paul came back into the room and summoned myself to the ICT. This is for the call with Christopher Boudram. Because at that point in time, we did not run footage as yet. The only footage that was run was the PISL camera, which was 730, and that was the light. We didn't get any footage on that at that point in time.
Well, in this statement, you said the risk assessment was overtaken by what emerged because of the video footage which was obtained. At no place you said here that the risk assessment continued.
So at 9:10 we started the risk assessment, just to give a timeline.
Just answer me the question. At paragraph 17,
Yeah.
did you say in your witness statement that the risk assessment process continued?
When I went back to ICT, the risk assessment process was not continued because I was put on other duties.
Okay. Now,
It stopped.
It stopped, yes.
And it stopped because Mr. Yearwood came to see you and said, we've got some video footage.
No, he came to see me to take me back to the ICT. That's when they had the discussion with Christopher Boudram around close to 10 o'clock.
Right. So you'd already spent what, the
About
40,
35 to
50
40 minutes working
yeah,
on the risk
40
assessment.
Right, spent 40 minutes working.
That's
on it.
correct.
Was that in writing in any place?
It was typed on a PC.
Thank you.
Now, at paragraph 16, you said that the ICT communicate you with Catherine from time to time. What's to that effect? Well, in fairness here, a request was made by the ICT, Colin and Randy, for Paul, Catherine Balkisoon, who was offshore, Rolf and I, to do a risk assessment. And there was a okay, and I'll read it for you. For possible rescue of the divers from inside the pipeline. This is when I left the shipping building to go to the safety office. We contacted Catherine to join the discussions.
That is correct. So Catherine was contacted, and we were looking at the risks with respect to sending someone into the pipeline, maneuverability, etc., at that point in time.
And you contacted Catherine, who was at berth 6.
Paul would have contacted Catherine, who was at berth 6,
Because you knew, as a member of the ICT then, that Catherine was in communication with the LMCS divers.
She was at the berth, that's correct.
And she was given feedback to the ICT as to what the LMCS divers were requesting.
She was given feedback with respect to the risk assessment, because at that point in time, I was not in ICT.
Whilst you were the ICT, did you have any feedback from her in respect?
Not directly. That would have come through either the planning section chief, Michael Wee, or the IC. The first time I had contact with Catherine Balkisoon was to do the risk assessment in the safety office.
Well, did she make any input in that risk assessment?
Yes, she did. We started the risk assessment, we started the discussion, and her feedback was critical in terms of finding out what was going on the site.
Well, did she tell you as part of that that the LMCS rescuers wanted to do a rescue?
Not at that point in time, because you need to assess before you go to rescue.
No,
So that's why we were doing the risk assessment, to assess.
So around what time was this, when this assessment was requested?
9:10.
9:10. Up to that time, did you have any information from Catherine? Did the
No.
ICT?
I didn't have any information from Catherine. I dealt strictly with Mr. Michael Wee and Colin Piper based on request for resources.
So you had no information about any rescue efforts?
Not at that time, no.
Not at that time. Okay. Now, you said you talked about the video footage. I want to go to
Before you do that, Mr. Maharaj, you said it a moment ago that somebody was typing this particular plan,
Yeah.
as far as it got, the risk
Yeah.
assessment, into a PC. Who was typing that?
Me.
You?
Yes.
Right. Is it still on your PC?
I will have to look for it.
Would you mind doing that?
I will
please?
try.
Right. Has no one asked you for this before?
No.
No, all right. Well, I'd be grateful if once you're finished here today, I don't ask you necessarily to come back to the hearing, but if you could find it for us, please.
No problem.
And send it to your lawyers, they'll then send it to us, all right?
Okay.
Now, in respect of the video footage, you dealt with that at paragraph 37 and 38 and 39 of your witness statement.
That's correct.
And at paragraph 37, you refer to HHSL Safety Systems Limited. You see that on the
So
screen?
there were two video footage, right? So if you go back up to,
Okay, I'm talking about the
Okay, no
one.
problem.
Okay. The one that you are talking about at paragraph 37.
no problem.
You would have seen there that you refer to Hull, right?
No, that's not Hull, that's HSSL.
Sorry, HSSL, all right. And then at paragraph 38, you said Ms. Vera of HHSL subsequently reported to the ICT in my presence that they inserted a line crawler at berth 6 and attempted to dislodge the dive cylinder but was unsuccessful.
Yes, that's correct.
Now the video the video footage, you saw the video footage?
Of HSSL,
Yeah.
not at that time. So as I said, there's two video footage.
I know. Did you ever see the video footage of HSS?
Way after.
Huh?
After, another
Way
day.
after. When?
Probably this Saturday afternoon or something.
Saturday afternoon. Now, but you have put in your witness statement that the crawler was unable to dislodge the dive cylinder.
That is what Mr. Vera told Mr. Colin Piper that I overheard, yes.
So you would not know as a fact whether the crawler pushed the video, pushed the tank, and it caused the blockage.
No, the crawler would not have caused the blockage. So if you go back to my statement, Atlantic LNG would have run cameras. They arrived at 10:45, and before 11 o'clock, they came back and provided feedback that there was a large cylinder at 45 feet into the horizontal section of the line. HSSL came after Atlantic LNG. So there were two independent video footage stating that there is blockage in the line.
Well, I want to, you said, just want you to what the operators of the crawler said about the crawler. If I go to 315, what's it good? 3157. Yes, 3155 of the supplemental witness statement bundle. 315. I'm sorry, 3153. That's it's dated December 16, 2022. This statement, right?
No, these are the- oh, yes. Yes, this is correct. Yeah, that's correct. Statement.
Because it refers to
Yes. And it's setting the position of crawler operator, right? The position. And if you look at the second to last paragraph, at 4:02 a.m., we were looking at ways of moving the tank. The operator began to gently push the tank in attempts to get as much distance as possible into the pipe. After several attempts in pushing the tank, the operator was able to move the tank approximately 9 feet, then 9 feet, then an additional 7 feet, and finally 3 feet for an overall total of 19 feet. You see that?
Yes, I'm seeing it.
And then if you go to page 3154, on the first part, well, at the beginning of the words, our persistence resulted in an additional 2 to 3 feet forward being achieved. However, the tank showed negligible signs of changing the orientation from a vertical to a horizontal position, which could have given the crawler the clearance it needed to pass the tank. At 4:30 a.m. and 200.3 feet inside the pipe, having exhausted all attempts to dislodge the dive tank, the recording was stopped. So this shows that the crawler was pushing the tank for some distance. Would you agree with that?
Based on your report, yes.
Yes. Now, it's also showed, if I refer you to page 3155, yeah, this is for the first of, this will be for the, is it the third? Sorry, the 1st of March, which would be the Tuesday. At page 3155, if you look at the 4th paragraph, we then quickly realized that pulling excess tether out of the case would be best suited as the rubber tracks on the crawler were not getting sufficient traction due to the residual oil on the surface of the pipe. So this suggests to me, and from what I read here, that it couldn't go further because the traction and it couldn't get the traction because of the oily substance. Am I correct?
Based on the report, it suggests that, yes.
Now, I also want to show you what was the state of inside the pipe according to the note made at the IMT. And if I take you to volume 2 of the supplemental core bundle,
Page 1572.
at page 1541.
41.
It's at the bottom of the page is at 12, is it 202? 202. This would be 202 AM. Yeah, this will be 202 AM.
So these are the handwritten notes
Yes, the
of the IMT.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
And you see at 202 it says clear water, no sign of oil, no airspace, difficult to tell if any airspace because of the position of camera.
Okay, I did not see this handwritten note. I could only report on what I heard Mr. Vera tell Mr. Colin Piper in my presence, and that's what I heard.
This is the earlier footage. That would be the Atlantic LNG footage because of the time. Not equal.
Well, this was the earlier note. Well, this was the note of the
Atlantic LNG.
Atlantic LNG camera
Because of the time.
because of the time. Yes.
Yes.
Right, so based on the report that Atlantic LNG would have given to Colin Piper in the room that I was in, was that they found a tank lodge at 45 feet in the horizontal and the camera could go no more. That is what I heard. And that's in my report.
Let's leave him. Okay.
Can I ask you about that? You're a diver, are you?
No, I'm not a diver.
Never been diving yourself?
No, but I've oversaw and supervised lots of diving activities,
Right.
confined space, etc.
You're familiar with the...
Yes.
Can I just ask you, we've got 30-inch, you know the size of a tank, an air tank, that's being used by scuba divers, don't you?
Correct.
Right. And what I suppose about, from the desk, about this tall?
Yeah.
Yes? Round, what, I suppose, 10 inches, maybe?
Correct.
Something like that, isn't it? If it's full, it's heavy, isn't it?
That's correct.
And obviously, if it's empty, it's very light.
Correct.
If it's full in a pipe filled with fluid, would it sit on the bottom of the pipe?
I think it should.
Yeah. And if it was empty, would it be floating?
It should be. It should have some level of buoyancy. Yes.
Yes. I mean, it'd be because now it's empty. It's got. It's obviously much lighter, and so the equilibrium between the fluid that it's in and the weight of the tank, it would just float along, wouldn't it?
It should.
Right. So, two things we can understand from what we've got here is that if the pipe was sitting on the bottom of if the tank was sitting on the bottom of the pipe full, and the whatever scope was being used was slipping because it's slippery, you can understand why it probably couldn't push the pipe along, the tank along very much. If, on the other hand, it had been used and was floating, it would be relatively easy to push in the water, wouldn't it?
Correct. But the first camera that Atlantic Energy sent in did not have any traction or any push. This basically going to provide video feedback of what is in the pipeline.
Yeah.
That indicated that a cylinder was blocking the pathway and it was lodged.
See, I struggle a little to understand how it could be lodged on its own, bearing in mind the sort of what we're talking about. I mean, how would that lodge itself inside a slippery 30-inch pipe? Like just, you know.
That's what the footage showed, sir.
Well, what it did was to come up against
A cylinder.
a tank.
Correct.
Whether there was anything else behind it is another question, isn't it?
Right, and the pipe crawler also confirmed that there was a tank that was lodged as well, based on the feedback that.
No, I follow what you're saying. What I'm asking you is to deduce what you can from that. You see, if you've got a heavy tank which is full of air, and it's sitting on the bottom of the pipe, and you've got some sort of camera, either with crawlers or not, and you can't push it out the way because it's going to be heavy, isn't it?
Correct.
But if it's been used and it's floating in the pipe, then it would be relatively easy to push.
That is
Literally
correct.
just do that and it would shoot along the pipe, wouldn't it?
That is correct.
Unless there was something the other side of it. Do you follow? So when perhaps it got to the point, whichever camera it was, and found that this tank couldn't move any further, perhaps that was because there was something behind it. Was that considered?
So that was thought of, but we had no verifiable evidence because we never got around the tank.
No, but I appreciate you couldn't get the other side of it. That was the problem. You couldn't get the camera the other side. But it doesn't prevent you from making deductions from the evidence that you had. The evidence was, we've encountered a tank. One of them, I think, you could actually read the numbers on the tank. The fluid in the pipe was so clear, you could actually read the numbers on the tank. Did you know that?
That's correct,
Right.
yes.
So you've got that far. So it's almost certainly mostly water. Right? That tank is in mostly water. It's either sitting on the bottom or it's got some buoyancy, one or the other. Right?
Correct.
If it's sitting on the bottom, and I've seen the video footage, it's not, right? So it must have some buoyancy. There must be something behind it to stop you being able to push it. Don't you think?
Correct, and that was thought of as well.
Right. What do you think that might have been?
It could have either been a person or a plug.
A plug?
It had to be something. It could have been a person. The thinking was
Well,
it could have been a person, but we was not sure.
Let's be clear. Right? Again, using our best skills of deduction, the plug is sucked or pushed into the pipe,
Correct.
followed by
Persons.
a whole range of tools and people.
Right.
So it was unlikely that this tank was coming up against a plug.
So it could have been a person, yes. It was unknown at that point in time.
Of course it's unknown. Of course it's unknown. But the question is, what could it reasonably be?
So the thinking was it could have possibly been a diver, but again, there was no verifiable evidence to basically confirm that.
What else could it be? Stab a guess.
I don't want to guess.
No, well, it's because it couldn't be anything else realistically, could it?
I don't know. I can't say. It's not verifiable from the video footage, and I don't want to say something that I'm not sure about.
No. Look, nobody's going to hold you to this, Mr. Holder. The fact is, though, is that your task that day was to assist them as best you could.
Correct.
In coming to a conclusion about the condition of the pipe and whether a rescue was achievable.
That's correct.
You'd sent cameras down, taken some time to achieve that, but you'd got some cameras down into the pipe. You've encountered these tanks, and it's described as lodged or wedged or various different descriptions given to it. But it's really difficult to conceive of a tank of its own just lodging itself in a slippery 30-inch pipe, isn't it?
But
On its own.
That's the footage that we saw, sir, and that's the deduction that we made.
Well, the deduction wasn't made. You didn't make any deduction. All you said was it stopped there. The deduction to be drawn from it is that there's something behind it stopping it going any further. That's the deduction. Isn't
And
it?
that was discussed, yes.
And discussed to what end?
In terms of, there was a tank that was lodged, there's a possibility that there's a person or something behind there which could not be confirmed via camera.
Right. But the possibility, well, it was more than a possibility, do you not agree? A probability.
It's probable but not confirmed.
Unconfirmed but probable.
Correct.
That would be a fair deduction to arrive at, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So perhaps at that point, whatever distance it had got to that stage, there was a body or someone alive. Who knows?
At that time, that data was not confirmed or verified, so.
So the likelihood is, isn't it, that the tanks of air would have had the spiders attached to them, wouldn't they? You know what I mean by the spider,
Yeah.
the various different bit that you put in your mouth, the depth gauge, all of that stuff, yes? Right?
Correct.
So perhaps, since when you look at the video footage, all you can see is the side or the back end of the tank, there was a spider attached to a man.
That was not confirmed.
Of course it's unconfirmed. Of course it's unconfirmed. But what I'm asking you is what deductions were reasonably made as to why it was that inside a 30-inch slippery pipe, a tank appeared to be wedged or stuck. Did you arrive? The conclusion, can I suggest, the only reasonable conclusion could be that there was a man the other side of it.
Possibly, yes, and that was discussed, as I said
Well, it was
before.
more than possible. I think we'd already agreed it was probable.
Correct.
All right. Okay, well, thank you.
But the risk assessment was stopped because of the video footage.
No, the risk assessment, the process was stopped because of the call by Budram. When I reported to ICT after the call, I was instructed to follow up on some other items, and I never resumed the risk assessment because the thinking at that time was, after the video footage, that the dive companies would complete the risk assessment, sir.
But that's not what you said at paragraph 17. You said this is because the need for the risk assessment was overtaken by what emerged in the video footage, which was obtained by the ICD of inside the pipeline I described later in the statement. And later in the statement, you describe at paragraph 37, 38, and 39 that Ms. Vera subsequently reported to the ICT in my presence that they inserted a line crawler at berth 6 and attempted to dislodge the dive cylinder but was unsuccessful. So the risk assessment was stopped because the ICT interpreted the footage.
No, that's incorrect. So the time that we were doing the risk assessment, my timing is probably a bit off, was 9:10 to around 9:50, 9:45, right? At that time, only one camera was run into the line, and that was PISL, and there was no visibility. Atlantic LNG reported to Paria around 10:45, and that was the first time that they had actual footage to see, and that was not available until around 11 o'clock, right? After that was looked at, Rolf was deployed to OTSL and Mitchell's to see if they could view the footage to basically establish a rescue. The first sign of any video footage was after Atlantic LNG ran their cameras,
Right.
not before.
What Mr. Maharaj is asking is, well, you might be saying that now. That is not what you say in your statement. So you need to correct your statement. Is that the position?
Yes, sir.
Because you understand, don't you, Mr. Holder, that this inquiry asked of Paria for its representatives and Heritage for its representatives to provide statements. You're represented by the same legal team, aren't you?
Yeah.
Now, you were invited to come for an interview. You decided, no doubt on advice, and I don't wish to go behind that, not to, right? So you wrote your statements and sent them to us.
Correct.
Presumably you took some care and consideration in the writing of those statements.
Yes.
And indeed, in your case, you wrote your statement as late as the 22nd of September of this year. Correct?
Correct, yeah.
Sorry? Last year, yes, forgive me, last year.
Yeah.
22nd of September last year. And did you have any notes or anything, any other documents to work with in the writing of that statement?
Just some light notes, etc., in terms of looking at and writing back the statement, also checking with the scribe and some of the conversations had with the heritage team.
So you did what you could to access such information as you could.
Correct.
In order to assist you to get this right.
Correct.
And you did that because you knew it was important.
Correct.
And then you say, you see, as Mr. Maharaj has pointed out to that paragraph 17, I began to document the draft risk assessment. That's you telling me, you putting it on the
Correct,
PC.
yes.
However, we were called back to the incident command post by Mr. Yearwood and never completed the risk assessment.
That is correct.
And that's all correct, isn't it?
That is correct. The last part is where I erred.
Yeah, so Mr. Yearwood interrupts you, your task as you were given. He interrupts you, and you never actually complete it as a result of that interruption.
Correct. I reported to the ICT.
Yeah, let's just take the statement as it says it. This, you say, is because, so you're now giving an explanation. This is because the need for the risk assessment was overtaken by what emerged in the video footage that was obtained by the ICT of inside the pipeline as described later in this statement, right? So when you're writing this yourself, you know that you're going to go on to describe this later in the statement, and you say that the reason Mr. Yearwood interrupts your putting together a risk assessment, he interrupts that. You get called back to your to the office, to the ICT, and the reason why he's interrupted you is because the whole process was overtaken by virtue of the video footage that had arrived.
We didn't run any video footage. The only video footage that was run at that time was PISL.
I'm going to come to what you say the position is now.
Correct.
Right? Are you saying that that sentence, this is because the need for the risk assessment was overtaken by what emerged as a video footage, was obtained by the ICT inside the pipeline as described as later in the set? Are you saying that that sentence is wrong?
At the time, yes. At the time
of what?
So based on the timing, right, from 9 to 9:50, we did not run any video footage that you could look at.
Right. Just pause there. That sentence is wrong.
Yes, it is.
Right. So I can happily scratch that out
sir.
as having been completely wrong.
Yes,
right?
sir.
So when you say in the previous sentence, I began to document the draft assessment. However, we were called back to the incident command post by Paul Yearwood and never completed the risk assessment. Why were you being called back to the command post by Mr. Yearwood?
That was because of the call to Mr. Budram.
Right. So you were being called back in order to be party
Yes,
to
sir.
the call to Mr. Budram.
Yes, sir.
Is that because Mr. Budram would have been able to give you some information which might have assisted you in making a risk assessment?
Possibly, yes, sir.
Well, almost certainly, isn't it? Otherwise, what's the point of you being there?
Correct.
You know, you don't need to just listen. There's lots of people listening, right? So the point of you being called back by Mr. Yearwood was to hear what Mr. Budram had to say.
That is correct.
Because Mr. Budram had come out of the pipe.
That's correct.
And he was the best person to tell you what was in the pipe.
To hear his account of what happened, that's correct.
Yes. So that you could return to your risk assessment armed with that information.
That is correct.
Did you return to your risk assessment?
No, after the call, the instruction was to verify where the Atlantic LNG camera was in to get an assessment, further assessment of what was the conditions in the pipeline.
So you've already got Mr. Budram's account, and now you're going to wait for the camera's account, as it were.
To verify, yes, sir.
After you got the camera's account, did you return to your risk assessment?
No raw seals was sent to talk to the divers, 2 dive teams, to look at the footage and complete the risk assessment to see if they would complete the dive, and they said it was too risky.
Right, no. Was the risk assessment ever completed?
No, sir.
Right. So,
No risk assessment was completed by me and the team, no.
no. And the one that you were typing into your PC, did you give that to Mr. Seals to take to the divers?
I think I emailed it. I'll have to double check.
Please, could you do that
I'll
as
do
well,
that,
please?
yeah.
Because this is all new, you see.
Correct.
This isn't in your statement. That's the point of asking you to come for an interview. Do you understand?
Understand.
We're doing this now on Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock because you didn't come for an interview to iron out these problems.
No problem.
Well, it is a problem because we're all here on Friday afternoon instead of 2 months ago. All right? But so that part of your statement is wrong and you want to change it.
Correct.
Thank you. Mr. Maharaj, it's
yes.
yours.
You said that Mr. Rolsey was given some instructions.
So after the video footage from Atlantic LNG was looked at, right, Colin Piper asked Rolf to go and speak to Mitchells and OTSL to have a look at the footage, look at the site, and basically give feedback if they could perform a rescue. That he was dispatched at around midnight or...
To give feedback if Mitchell and the
OTSL,
could
yes.
have done a rescue.
That is correct.
Not if he was of the opinion that a rescue could be done.
Correct.
Correct. No further questions.
Before this, before you came to give your evidence, and just after you'd sworn your oath, you indicated that you wanted to change a particular time on your in your statement, and we did that at paragraph 27. Do you remember? You changed it from 8 o'clock to 9:55.
Around 9, after 9, yes, that's correct.
Can I take it from that that you read this statement before coming into this courtroom?
Yeah.
And you didn't spot this error on paragraph 17, rather more substantial than the time error on paragraph 27?
Yes, I did actually, but
Why
I
don't you
remembered.
tell us?
But I remembered the mock-up, and in reading the first part of the statement, I missed in terms of declaring that.
So you did spot the error, but you didn't say anything about it.
I missed it. Yes.
Yes. Who else would like to ask Mr. Holder some questions? Yes. Ms. Alfonso, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Fleming Holder.
Afternoon.
Right. My name is Nairi Alfonso. I am the representative of this SWWTU, and I just have a couple of questions to ask you.
Sure.
I want to go to paragraph 14 of your witness statement, which is at, well, partially on 1492 and partially on 1493. Yeah. You say there, rescue efforts in the pipeline and the inspection of the inside of the pipeline as a priority. So you said that was a priority while you were, I don't want to say on duty, but while you were present in Paria's ICT unit. You saw that as a priority?
So when I arrived, the search and rescue at sea was going on. When Mr. Boudram came out of the pipeline, there was a scenario change, and now efforts were now directed to confined space, understanding what was the condition in the pipeline in order to have a plan to rescue the individuals in the pipeline. Okay. So that was the scenario change.
Would you, okay, thank you. Would you agree in the time that you were on duty, because you handed over to somebody called Mr. Arno, yes?
That's correct.
Right, so at the time, in the time that you spent there, would you agree that the focus of the efforts going on was in respect of inspection or finding out the conditions in the pipe rather than performing a rescue?
So for confined space, one of the requirements under OSHA, IMCA, IOGP, before you commit anyone or any team to a confined space, it must be safe, suitable, and sufficient. You have to assess before sending any person into a confined space. So for confined space incidents, they have numerous lessons learned on single and multiple fatalities. There's something called stop, think, assess, and respond. And that is what the IC did in terms of stopping to assess the conditions into the pipeline. So I'll explain this. The confined space in the habitat space is different from the confined space in the pipeline, right?
Thank you.
The team had a emergency response plan for the habitat. They did not have an emergency response plan for the pipeline. Two different scenarios. Same confined space, but you have more maneuverability in the habitat than in the pipeline, and you cannot use the same ERP for that. So first thing the IC did, based on the scenario change, was stop and assess. I need to understand what is the conditions in the pipeline. You cannot send a rescue in there and you don't understand because it's not trial and error. You need to make sure and understand what are the conditions in order to draft a proper rescue plan. You cannot send a diver, bring him back out, send a diver, bring him back out. No. It has to be pinpoint accuracy, and you need to know exactly what is required in order to perform a rescue.
Okay, and the way that you are going to achieve that is getting camera footage, yes?
So the camera footage would have told you what was the conditions in the pipeline, where the divers were, and from there you make further assessment because you have to give the dive teams that in order for them to do their necessary emergency response plan and rescue plan before entering the confined space.
From your recollection, what is the time that the first camera went in? Was that the boroscope?
The first camera went in, I believe, around 7:30.
Around 7:30. That's the
Correct.
one without sufficient light?
That's correct, ma'am.
That's okay. And the next one went in?
So Atlantic LNG reached on site about 10:45, briefed, and I think they were back probably by 11:30, 11:45 with feedback to the IC.
I see. And that was the crawler that was
No,
not
the
able...
crawler came after.
Oh, I see. And the problem with
That
that...
second one was after 12 o'clock.
Okay. So that second one, the limitation of that was what? The length of the cable? What was it?
So the second one basically was to dislodge the cylinder
Oh, I see.
that was seen in the first video.
Okay. And the crawler is the one that came in after midnight?
Correct, yes, because there were some issues in terms of mobilizing HSSL. There were numerous calls until we got onto them, and then they responded to Paria.
But each of those cameras gave you an incomplete picture of the conditions in the pipe. That be correct to say?
So it gave the conditions that we saw at that point in time, and we used and the IC and the team used that to make a decision.
And what was that decision, Mr. Fleming-Holder?
So the decision based on the video footage was that there was a cylinder that was lodged, and we need to remove the cylinder without again committing a person, and that's where the crawlers came in.
Okay, so the crawler was trying to dislodge it.
That is correct.
Moved it 19 feet or something like that,
That
yes?
is correct.
Okay, but couldn't dislodge it further than that?
That is correct.
Okay. I just want to be clear, Mr. Fleming-Holder. We have had a lot of dive team names thrown around, and you contacted Eastern Divers?
So let me just walk through scenario change. So first, search and rescue, scenario change, getting footage, right? Then when Rolf went to ask the divers if they could do the dive or not based on the footage, that was no. The next step, HSSL with the crawlers, right? They couldn't dislodge. They also said that they could rescue. After they said that, the next option that was thrown out was to pump down and do a dry rescue. Then started to looking at mobilizing pumps and was asked in terms of if we know any confined space rescue teams, Eastern Divers, and Eastern Divers was contacted and told to report to Paria.
Okay. So did you contact Eastern Divers, a dive company, or Eastern, and I want to get the name right, Eastern Emergency Response Services?
So Eastern Emergency Response Services was contacted by Heritage and sent to Paria.
And they are not divers?
They are using industry to perform rescue.
Okay.
They are very competent in terms of rescue.
In dry environments?
In dry environments.
Okay. And as far as you knew, with the limited information you had, the environment where the divers was not dry?
That is correct. So the strategy at that time, or the thinking, was to pump down the line and perform a dry rescue, because the dive teams, which were consulted, said that it was too risky to enter the pipeline at that point in time.
Well, the line was never pumped down.
So pumps were mobilized, yes, right? So got through with IOCL, and pumps began to mobilize around 4 to 5 in the morning. And then they were en route to Paria to effect that strategy.
As far as you know, was that strategy employed?
So I left Paria at probably 8 o'clock Saturday morning, and as the plan that was discussed at that point in time, when I came back on shift, that plan was not put in place, no.
Okay, so Eastern, let's make it easy, Eastern response.
Eastern did respond?
No, you don't know. You never the company's Eastern response.
That's correct, yes.
Right, right. I'm just trying to distinguish it between
Okay.
Eastern divers, right? I said, they were never utilized because then it was not a dry environment was not created in the pipeline.
So they also looked at the response, as far as I know, and I believe they said it was too risky as well.
Okay. But the environment for them to undertake their duties
It was not pumped.
was not created.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Fleming Hood.
No problem.
Mr. Ramadar, as you'll have probably noticed, my patience is running very thin at the moment. So I want to finish by 5:30.
Peter,
Oh, sorry.
Yes. Thank you very much, Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Holder.
Good afternoon, Mr. Ramada.
We appreciate certainly the difficult circumstances that you were all placed under that afternoon and into the night where this tragedy occurred, yes? So you understand that nobody expected perfect circumstances, correct?
Correct.
Yes. You said something very interesting there, that it should be safe, suitable, and sufficient before you move.
That's correct.
You appreciate there are grades of safety, degrees of safety.
It depends on the risk.
Always does. You crossed the road recently?
Yeah, look left, look right before
Thank you.
crossing.
Exactly. But there's always a risk, correct?
You only cross when there's no risk available.
When there's no risk available,
Correct.
of course. So that you will never cross a road, as an example, if there is a car maybe a mile away.
So to answer that question, sir, right, there are road crossings, there are traffic lights,
Yes.
there are rules. You follow the rules in crossing the road so you get to the next side safely.
Beautiful. And of course, you know there are persons who sometimes take the risk and get killed, yeah?
Those are other persons, you're asking me the question.
Yeah. No, but you appreciate there are other persons who sometimes take that risk, yeah?
And they get killed,
And
yes.
they get killed.
That's correct.
And there are others who take the risk to get to the other side and reach across wholesomely, correct?
It depends.
All right, so let's deal with what we're dealing with here today. So we're dealing with degrees of safety. Explain what you mean by suitability or suitable.
So for confined space as per OSHA, IMCA, and all these other standards,
Yes.
right, you need to make sure, one, that entry and exit into a confined space is safe for persons who have to occupy the space and also for persons who have to rescue. If it is not suitable and sufficient, you shall not send in a rescue team.
Beautiful. So that the definition of suitable, is it objective?
So suitable will mean that, one, you have to, if it's a tank or a pipeline, it needs to be isolated, one.
Right.
Two, it needs to be drained. Three, the atmosphere in there must be at a certain percentage, 19.5 to 22.9, I believe, right? You must check your lower, your short-term exposure limit, your long-term exposure limit. You need to check heat stress, etc.
Beautiful.
You need to have a proper rescue plan. You need to identify that the isolations are suitable and sufficient to the persons who are entering. You need to do a drill prior
Great.
to ensure that all those things are working and there are standards which governs that, yes.
Right. Of all those things, which were you able to ascertain?
So based on the pipeline on that day,
Yeah.
right, without going into the pipeline, there were many unknowns. You didn't know where the persons were, you didn't know what was the condition inside the pipeline,
Right.
and you need to establish that before you set, as per standard, before you send any individual into the pipeline, sir.
So if you know nothing, you will allow men to die.
So if you know nothing, right, you cannot send a rescue team into a unknown condition. And I'll take you take me across the road, I'll take you to emergency
I go
response
with
now,
you.
right?
I go with you.
So first responder,
Yeah.
right? You cannot respond to a medical emergency unless the scene is safe. Major emergency management, you cannot commit a search and rescue team unless it is safe to commit the search and rescue team. Else, you are willfully and recklessly endangering your search and rescue team.
Beautiful. So this is where we are now. So it's about liability that you are more concerned with.
No, it's about making sure, as per the standard, sir,
Yes.
that it is safe and suitable to
We-
commit a rescue team.
We've heard that.
Correct.
There are degrees of safety we talk about. Do you agree with that?
So in major emergency management, it's either it's safe or it's unsafe. It have no degrees.
Really?
Yes, sir.
Is that really right? I mean, if you deem it to be unsafe, does that mean, well, you can never do it then?
So if it is unsafe, you have two options, right? If you have a gas release and it is unsafe to send persons in, you either shut down, blow down, allow it to dissipate, you monitor wind direction, etc., or you abandon the facility.
Yeah, all right, that's a gas release. I mean, we're talking about going into a pipe here. So you're carrying out, or at least you got partway through carrying out a risk assessment. If you deem that it is unsafe to go
That's it,
in the
let him
pipe,
die.
that's it, is it? That's the end. Don't go in.
So, one, the pipeline, the camera went in, there was blockage, right?
No. Chair,
let
can
me-
you just
let me
address?
explain.
No, you need to address my question first, which
Uh-huh.
is Mr. Ramadar's question, really. Answer that question, then you can add whatever rider you like. But is it the case that once you determine it is unsafe, that is the end of it?
So if it is unsafe, you find another means to protect the rest of the individuals.
Right, so you look for ways to make it safer.
So if it is not safe for you to deploy a search and rescue team, if you blow down and it's not safe, if you have other scenarios and it's not safe, you either evacuate or you abandon the facility or based on the
I follow
emergency.
that. I think what we're trying to get at, and I'm trying to understand because Mr. Ramadar's asked it and it seemed to me relevant. Let's say you're doing the risk assessment as you started.
Correct.
You told us you did. You start by saying, well, going in that pipe is unsafe, right? That's a given, I suspect, right? Nobody would think it was safe to climb into a pipe that's only 30 inches in diameter. So you're looking for ways, are you not, to make it safer rather than safe. It is never safe, is it, to climb maybe 100 feet into a pipe that's only 30 inches in diameter?
Correct. And how you make it safe? By ascertaining what is going on in the pipe via video surveillance, and then making a plan on that video surveillance.
No, you're not hearing my question. My question is, it is never safe to go into the pipe. There's always an inherent danger going in maybe 100, 200 feet into a pipeline like that. It is always going to be unsafe. The question is, to what extent can you mitigate that?
So you risk assess it.
Yes,
You
exactly.
get the equipment. So your risk assessment will tell you if it is safe to enter or not, based on the conditions in the pipeline, yes or no?
See, I'm struggling with that concept, right? I am genuinely struggling with it. If you say it's black and white, it's either safe or unsafe, I don't understand how you get from being unsafe to something that's safe
So,
in the scenario that we're dealing with. Because it's not a case, is it, of, to take Mr. Ramadar's example of crossing the road, waiting until midnight, there are no cars on the road at all, and then you can walk across the road, then it's safe. This is not that scenario, is it?
and I understand that. So to understand what is going on in the pipeline, because there were lots of unknowns,
Yes.
right? You needed to, one, make sure and understand what are the conditions
Sure.
before committing a person to enter the pipeline, and you risk assess that,
Yes.
and you try to bring it as low as reasonably practicable, and
there
your
we
risk
are.
assessment will let you know if it is safe to enter or not.
Bring it as low as reasonably practicable means, doesn't it? You're making it safer. It's not that it ever becomes completely safe. It's simply safer by putting in different ameliorating features that will help to make it safer.
So if you don't know the conditions in the pipeline,
No, forget that for the moment. Right?
Okay.
Whatever the conditions are, whatever the position is, right? However far they are in the pipe, however many men there are in there, in order to get from unsafe to safe in a pipe like that is it's just not achievable. What you can do, and what I understood you to be saying when you looked at a risk assessment, was to say, how do I get it as safe as I can make it? That's not safe. It's simply as safe as you can manage it.
correct, and that is
I don't want to be pedantic about it, but there is a difference, isn't there, between complete safety, so that you're not prepared to let anybody go into the pipe unless there is a 100% guarantee that they will never be injured. That's never going to be achievable, is it?
That's not what I'm saying.
No, good. Then
What I am saying is, right, according to standards, you have to risk assess and you have to understand the conditions before entering a confined space, regardless if it's a pipeline, a vat, a separator, right?
Right.
At the time of the incident, that was unknown.
So in your
your
view is that without knowing the condition inside that pipe, it would never be safe enough to send anyone in.
You need to ascertain what is the conditions, and you need to plan for those conditions before you send a human being to rescue. That is what I'm saying.
So when you started your risk assessment, you had no idea what the condition inside the pipe was, did you?
So we know that it had fuel, right? We didn't know where the persons were, right? We didn't know if it had a blockage or anything like that. But we started the risk assessment. You have to find those unknowns. Where the individuals, what is the condition in the pipe, how you're going to rescue, what's your methodology of rescuing to develop your rescue plan. You would not know that from standing on the surface and not understanding the conditions in the pipe. You have to send some kind of surveillance.
Yes, all right.
And what was used was a camera. Why would I risk, or why would somebody risk sending a human being if they're not sure? You send a rescue team in when you are 100% sure that they can safely rescue the people.
Right. So then we got to where we are.
Yeah, 100%.
So what you're saying is you need to be, Mr. Ramadar, I'm asking questions at the moment.
My apologies. I'll stick myself.
What you're saying is you would not be prepared to let anyone enter that pipe unless you are 100% sure.
Meaning if the risk is as low as reasonably practicable, sir.
That's not the same thing, is it?
So,
Come on.
so you need to risk assess as low as reasonably practicable to ensure that the person who is going to rescue can return safely.
Of course. Nobody's suggesting otherwise, but that's not the same thing as being 100% sure, which you just said.
Well, as low as reasonably practicable. Because you need to make sure that the rescuer could return.
Well, rescues happen all the time, all over the world. I used to be involved in a rescue team in the mountains in Austria. That doesn't mean that there is no risk associated. When somebody falls off the mountain, we could try and rescue them. It doesn't mean for a minute that that there is a 100% risk, a 100% chance that when I start climbing that mountain, I'm going to come down uninjured. There is always a risk. There is always a risk in effecting some kind of rescue. And that's what I was trying to get at, and it seems to me you let the cat out the bag when you said it has to be 100%. The reality is it's never going to be 100%.
So, Mr. Lynch, there are a number of rescuers who have died as
I know.
well, based
That's part of the hazard of being a first responder, isn't it?
But
That rescuers do die. They die all the time. They don't stop rescuing just because rescuers die. What they try and do is to mitigate the risk. And mitigating the risk doesn't mean reducing it down to 100% so that you're sure that there is no question of anybody not being able to come out of that pipe alive. It's simply not a realistic approach, is it?
But that's not what your standard says. Your standard says that you get it down to as low as reasonably practicable, and
Yes,
you need to make sure
that's
that the
not 100%.
well, you need to make sure that the rescuer could return.
You need to make sure that you've done everything you can to give him the best chance of returning.
And that's why you need to, one, understand the conditions in the pipe,
Well, I understand
risk
all of that.
assess it,
I got it.
build your emergency response plan so that when the rescuer, if he goes in, if it's as low as reasonably practicable, he can return, sir.
Do we agree that you were wrong when you said 100%,
It's supposed to be as low as reasonably practicable,
which
yes.
is not 100%, is it?
That is correct.
Right, so you're wrong about that, aren't you?
It's as low as
Do
reasonably
you want to
practicable.
withdraw that?
No problem.
Well, do you want to withdraw it or not?
So again, when you're doing a risk assessment, it's supposed to be as low as reasonably practicable.
Yes. Do you want to withdraw your observation, which we have on a transcript, because I don't want to rely on it later on? Do you wish to withdraw the suggestion that it has to be 100%?
I will leave it, I will withdraw it and leave it as low as reasonably practicable.
Well, so you're replacing the 100% with as low as reasonably practicable?
Yes, sir.
With which I think we can both agree.
No problem.
Thank you, Mr. Ramadan.
Thank you so much, Chairman. You withdraw it today, but on the 25th of February, that was your position, wasn't it?
No, sir, so
Hold. It was not your position you required 100% on the 25th of February.
no, sir.
Good. What percentage would have been good for you?
So, as I said, right,
Simple question. What percentage would have been good for you?
so we need to assess
No,
the
we don't need. I'm asking you. We're not assessing here. The men dead. What percentage would have been adequate for you?
it would have been based on the assessment that the camera gave
Yes.
and the emergency response plan.
Right. Ad nauseum. What time your camera reach? Forgive me, please. What time your camera reach?
So, yeah, but there were 3 cameras. One came
What
at
time your
7:30,
camera reach?
one came at 10:45, one
Right.
came at after 1.
Right. So the 7, let's deal with the 7 something. You got any useful information from that?
No, because the
No.
light intensity was
Beautiful.
inadequate.
That failed. Second one.
There was information from it, yes.
Right. About the tank.
That is correct.
Good. Knowing that there was a tank, you think that was a prohibition that will cause the death of a rescuer?
So knowing there was a tank, you need to assess how you're going to, what are the means to remove the tank so you could get around the tank to get further information to know what is the position of the persons in the pipeline.
So up to the tank, up to that tank, you knew that you could safely go.
So up to the tank was probably 105 feet.
Thank you. But you knew you could safely go.
At that time,
Right. So did
possibly,
you send
yes.
anybody up to 105 feet up to the tank to make a physical assessment? Because you knew there was no other danger. You knew all you could have at that 105-foot length, didn't you?
But we didn't know what was behind the tank, sir.
Of course. But you could go to that point and then assess from there, physically look upon it, or push the camera even further, isn't it?
So the camera was pushed further and the
Right.
pipe crawler was sent in to remove the
So,
tank.
I
Let me
don't-
finish.
No, I want you to understand my question.
No, let him finish.
All right,
He's
all right.
entitled to finish. You've got
No,
to let him finish.
Okay, so that we wouldn't misunderstand each other.
Right.
Go ahead, please.
So the purpose of the crawler was to attempt to dislodge the tank without sending somebody in there.
Right.
So you have a clear understanding what is behind the tank so that you can build a proper plan as low as reasonably practicable to rescue someone if that was possible.
What time did the crawler go?
The crawler went in after midnight.
Beautiful. What was the timeline in your mind, you HSSC, whatever you call yourselves, I'm not too sure, right? But health, safety, and what?
Environment.
And environment. What timeline did you, as a practically minded, experienced person, believe that these men had that time to live? What time frame were you working with?
I guess based on if they had tanks, probably 5 to 6 hours.
Right. From the time of the accident.
Correct.
And what time would that take you to?
So again, understand this, Mr.
I don't have
Ramadan.
to understand. You answer the question.
But answering your question?
What time, 6 hours
Could you just
after?
answer the question?
No, you answered.
Just a minute. First of all, Mr. Ramadan is right. He's asked you a straightforward question. You can answer that question. You can add a rider, anything you want to say afterwards. I don't have a difficulty with that. But he asked you what time did that take you to? Right? You said 5 to 6 hours was your estimate of the period of time that you thought they had air. Then asked you, well, what time does that take you to? So answer that question. If you want to add something afterwards, you're more than welcome to. But answer the question first, please.
Very difficult, Mr. Chairman. When he asked that question, all the witness said in answering Mr. Ramadan, and that was that exploded Mr. Ramada.
That's as far as he got, was it?
Yeah.
My
Probably
name
doesn't
is
like
not
his
an
name,
answer.
I don't know.
My name is not an answer to the question. So could you tell us the number? Because I am very painfully aware of the time frame we're working with.
So, Mr. Ramada, right?
Okay, there we go.
So, understand this.
Thank you.
It took 3 hours, the team were doing search and rescue at sea, right? And then when the scenario changed, and this is important, right? Then they knew that persons were in the pipeline. There was no response plan for that at that point in time. So for 3 hours, search and rescue was at sea, not in the pipeline. Search and rescue in terms of understanding the conditions only came into effect after Mr. Budram was found. So post Mr. Budram was understanding what was going on in the pipeline in order to effect a rescue.
Right. So
You still haven't answered his
Yeah,
question,
thank
in
you.
fairness. to him,
So in
right?
fairness, so 3 hours, right? It took from the time of the incident for search and rescue, right? And it also took about 3 to 4 hours for mobilization of equipment to find out the conditions in the pipeline. And again, I say, you cannot send someone into a confined space without understanding, as low as reasonably practicable, what are the conditions as per the standards, sir.
We're talking about the life of the men. You said 5 to 6 hours. What time then, from the moment of the accident to the time of their death, did you contemplate? Forget all the difficulties you had in between. What time?
So the 6 hours would take you from 3 to 9 o'clock in the night.
Thank you so much. So you knew by 9 o'clock, if they were not rescued, consider them dead.
So that was not a consideration.
No, I'm asking you from the simple maths.
So, Mr. Ramada, that was not the consideration. We were trying to put things in place to safely rescue the guys by finding out information.
Yes. And while you're making hay, the horse will perish, correct? You know that statement?
And can you repeat?
Let's move on. You worked in your mind with a time frame for life up to 9 o'clock, correct?
6 hours if you have oxygen, yes.
Yeah, 6 hours from 3 is 9. Yeah? But you still needed to assess further, and you knew by 7 something that there was a tank impeding.
By 11 o'clock, we know that there was a tank impeding.
So not, before that, you didn't even know. Correct?
No, sir.
Right. But you did know that Michael Corban had got into that pipe and went some short distance in 15 feet beyond the elbow, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. You also knew by Christopher's mere existence that life was sustained within the pipe. Correct?
Yes.
And you knew that he was able to come out of the pipe.
That is correct.
Yes. You knew at some point in time as to how far from information he would have given, he and others would have been.
So the information I was heard was he was 2 pipe lengths from the elbow. 2 pipe lengths from the elbow puts you at where the large cylinder was, 45 feet into the horizontal, sir.
Beautiful. 45 feet from the elbow?
That's correct.
Thank you. And that's the point. Good. And there was no danger up to the point of the lodge tank, from what you told us that you learned of subsequently. Correct?
We learned that based on the camera footage, yes.
Yes. So while you're waiting for cameras, men dying. You agree with that?
So, sir, there was 2 procedural breaches.
Yeah, we're hearing about procedure.
No, you need to listen.
My question, I don't have to listen to you. You have to listen to the question and you
Wow.
answer it. Yes, it's wow. It's wow because you made decisions that night.
Really?
Or well, you meaning Paria and your
The
group.
process is a question and an answer, not a speech.
Thank you.
Right, so can we have,
Yeah.
you can make your speech next week. So, and dressing up a question as a speech, rather dressing up a speech as a question is not acceptable. Now,
Thank you very much.
Please, Mr. Ramadar, I
course.
really would like to stop soon. So,
And so would I.
can you get to the
Yeah.
point that you want to make,
Right.
and then he can answer it.
Yeah. So that you knew from what you had learned from the live person, the direct evidence, that the men, or at least Mr. Corban, would have been shortly beyond 45 feet.
He never got to 45 feet, sir.
Who didn't get to 45 feet?
Kurban.
No, I'm talking about Faizi Kurban, the deceased.
So if he was right behind Mr. Bujram, right?
Yeah.
The camera would have picked him up before the large cylinder. He was not picked up before the large cylinder.
How far was the large cylinder?
40 feet from the elbow.
That's the point.
45 feet from the elbow.
Thank you. So just beyond that, that's what we're talking about.
But there's no conclusive evidence to substantiate what you're saying.
Right. You know what the conclusive evidence is? 4 dead men. Right? And as the chairman has painfully made it clear to us all, that you have to do all that which is practically reasonable to achieve success.
And while I hear that and understand, right, you also need to follow the rules of confined space because there's a procedural breach that created an undesirable event. Are we now saying that it's okay to breach procedure again and recklessly endanger a rescuer? No. You have to follow the rules of confined space, sir.
Have you heard the evidence that you gave?
I heard the evidence I
Up
gave.
to the blockage, there was no danger. You agree with that?
After the blockage based on the footage, it was clear except the large cylinder.
Right. So there was no danger. Correct. You agree with that? I want to move very quickly on.
But that's what the camera would have shown.
Yes, and that's subsequent.
Did you know whether Mr. Budram had used a tank in order for himself to get out?
He would have to.
Right. So it wouldn't surprise you, given that he came out, that there was a tank between him and Faizi. Would it?
It could have been, yes.
Well, almost certainly was, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Right, so perhaps behind that tank was Faizi.
We didn't confirm that.
No, you didn't.
You didn't confirm a lot. You agree you didn't confirm a lot that night?
So we only confirm what the camera showed, sir.
You
Is
appreciate...
there much more, Mr. Ramadan?
No, not at all.
Please.
Not at all. Risk. The amount of risk you will take is dependent on the value you see, isn't it?
I've done this.
No, well, forgive me, let me hear. Or the value you see. Did you value the lives of those 4 men sufficiently?
So, Mr. Ramada, I value everyone's life.
You didn't really expect a different answer to that, did you, Mr. Ramadan?
No, no. But the unknowns outweighed the value of their lives.
I disagree.
Thank you.
So you need to confirm, right, before you again send someone in to rescue and endanger them. You have to confirm the conditions.
I think we understand your position, Mr. Holder. You've made it very clear. Are there any other questions of Mr. Holder? Do you have any? Yes. How long do you think you're going to be?
2 questions. 2 questions.
2 questions.
Good afternoon. My name
Hi,
is
good afternoon.
Kamini Prasad Maraj, and I'm for LMCS Limited. I heard you said you have 11 years experience in the IMT?
As an incident commander, yes.
As an incident commander.
As an ICS.
ICS. And how many incidents have you presided over as the incident commander?
In Repsol a lot. So I would have done fires.
You have any ballpark figure in your head? No? Yes?
More than 15 probably.
Any involving lives? Actual saving of a life?
Medical treatment, outbreaks, gas releases, yes, all involve lives. All, 70 people, 200 and something people, yes.
All right. And then also earlier, you were saying that during the course of between 9:15, whatever that timing was, you were doing the risk analysis.
We started the risk analysis, that's
Do you
correct.
recall how far or what the content of that document that you were typing up?
I will have to get back the document to see, but I know we would have gone probably about 35 to 40 minutes into the document, yes.
And from the best memory that you can conjure at this moment, do you remember how many pages you had?
No, we were still on the first page because we were discussing maneuverability into the pipeline, how you're actually going to rescue, and looking at the risks associated with that.
Okay. Thank you. That's
No problem.
Mr. Fleming Holder, you are aware of the removal of the plug and all of that caused a delta P event. That's, I think, accepted in this inquiry by now.
Yes.
The removal of the mechanical and inflatable plug, that would require, well, that's not, you're familiar with the permit to work system, I take it?
Very familiar.
Yes. The removal of a plug in that scenario of that underwater project would require a separate and distinct permit to work approval for the removal of the plugs in that scenario, wouldn't it?
So so that's energy isolation. So yes,
That's what?
that's energy isolation. So you're actually removing the plug, which is a barrier for vapors coming up to create a ignitable atmosphere within the habitat and also prevent anybody from getting in. So that should be a separate permit, risk assessment, emergency response plan based on the methodology. And if it is supposed to be subsea, that is supposed to be properly risk assessed with an emergency response plan. And if it is on surface, same thing holds.
And what is it in thinking to have an independent, standalone permit to work for the removal of the plug? Why is that advisable?
In order to control work.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Maharaj, just can I remind you, you offered to check your computer
Yes, sir.
to find the partial risk assessment that you were typing into the computer. I'd be grateful if you would do that for me, please. And if you have it, as I say, pass it to the lawyers. The question that you've just been asked in respect of the removal of the plug requiring a separate permit to work. I think there was a similar operation carried out on another riser 2 years earlier in 2020. We made a request for certain documents in relation to that. Is it 2021? It's either 2020 or 2021. Somebody tell me.
2020.
But either way, a very similar operation carried out by the same firm, LMCS, on behalf of Paria, all right? That involved plugs as well, as I understand it.
Okay.
Can you find out for me, please? I know your heritage rather than Paria, but perhaps you can convey this, and I know Mr. Peterson is listening to what I'm saying. If there was a work permit for the removal of the plug in that case,
I'll find,
all
no
right?
problem.
If you could find out, and somebody let me know if that is. Sorry? Or I'm told by Mr. Wilson, who knows more about these things than me, an isolation checklist or certificate. Anything else? No. Right, okay, thank you. So if that could be just checked so that I could find out if that,
Okay.
if it doesn't exist, it doesn't. If it does, then can I have it?
No problem.
Right, look, thank you very much indeed for coming. I appreciate it. We're quite late on a Friday afternoon, and I appreciate your being here. So you're free to go, and of course you're at liberty then to watch or see any of this that you might want to. But thank you for coming anyway. That is it for today. Monday, I set out the timetable already. Thank you. Please go. I've set out the timetable. We'll start at 10 on Monday, even though we've got now 2 extra witnesses. So what we were hoping for was a short day, but it won't be perhaps quite as short as we thought. So that's where we are. Please all have a good weekend, and I will see you all on Monday at 10 o'clock. Thank you very much. Please feel free to go. I've got to tidy up my own stuff.